you gotta maintain, you know? Yeah, so. This song is for the flower that blossoms in the rain.
Trying to get a baseline for everyone. I wanted to, when I was thinking about this topic, I just so happened to get into a comment battle with somebody, and it's always people who just doubt patriarchy exists or patriarchy is not all bad. You know what I mean? And I'm like, all right, this is the type of person that this live is for. So do you want to, any words of introduction, things you want to say as we get into the conversation?
No, thanks for having me. I love that you're doing this. I love the name for it. I think it's great. I think, I read all of Bell Hook's books last summer. Like, I just binged them all and it really, really contributed to my evolution on a lot of these topics, because I'm learning along with people. It may look like I'm trying to lead these conversations, and in a sense I am, but I'm also participating in them. I'm learning with everybody else. I think we learn so much faster in community because, I've had bad takes before or incomplete takes, and people will come on and be like, well, have you considered this? And yeah, it ends up being a learning experience for me too. So we're all on this journey together. And that's what I don't like to seem like I'm preaching at men. Right. I mean, most of my content is consumed by women, not men. But yeah, we all have stuff to learn. We're all doing this together. We're all waking up together. Some of us are a few years ahead of others, but largely it's a group project, So
absolutely. So, and this is a question I ask for everyone that comes on to the project, because for whatever reason, it's such a disputed topic, right? So, what is patriarchy, in your own words, and how does it negatively impact women and also men?
I mean, I look at patriarchy as a power structure that concentrates power in a small group of men, even though all men benefit to it to some degree. It is designed to work in tandem with capitalism and white supremacy and colonialism to really keep power concentrated in the people that basically started it. The people who envisioned this dream for how humans were going to live were those white, cishet white men, right? Largely. And patriarchy is just one of the tools, one of the systems that, in a nutshell, patriarchy gives men more power via the exploitation of non-men. That's the overly simplistic, the oppression and the exploitation of non-men. So yeah, I think that you can't look at it alone. You can't look at it in isolation as just patriarchy. You have to look at it through an intersectional lens, or the pieces won't make sense. But to anybody out there that says that they don't believe that patriarchy is real, to them I would say this. Something like 80% of our, political positions are filled by men. Probably 80 to 90% of C-suites and boards are men, right? So you either have, and the leaders of most countries historically and even currently, men. So you either believe that men are just genuinely that superior to women, which is sexist in and of itself, or there's a patriarchy. There's either a system doing this, or you think it's a meritocracy and you're just better than everybody else, right? And when you put it that way, there is no middle ground. There is no way to say that women are just as capable as men, but patriarchy doesn't exist. Well, then why does the world look like the world looks, if that's true? There has to be something at play. And the same goes for, white supremacy and capitalism, right? Same thing. I mean, not identical, but close enough.
No, I agree. I think I used to think of oppressive systems as a tree, right? And I used to think of white supremacy kind of as the trunk of that tree. But I found it helpful to also think of it as, because in a certain extent it is in the modern day, but I started to think of it as patriarchy being the trunk of that tree, and capitalism and white supremacy and ableism, all these things kind of branching off of it, just because patriarchy is so old. Yeah. Right, patriarchy is older than modern day racism. It's so old that we think that it's normal, or it's the only way to live.
But it's natural.
It's this natural. It's this natural phenomenon that evolved as humans evolved, and that's not the case. If that was the case, you wouldn't need laws to enforce patriarchy. You know, you wouldn't need misandry, misogyny, and I guess because I said misandry. Misandry for me is a byproduct of misogyny. Sure. But you wouldn't have either of those things. It would just be this natural occurring phenomenon. So
women would just be like thrilled with their role.
Right.
If this was natural, then like none of us would have ambition. And by the way, like I never meet men as ambitious as me, and I'm not ambitious financially. I'm ambitious to like have influence and change the world. I've always been ambitious since I was born, and I've seldom come across men as ambitious as me. So either like there's a big universal mistake, or maybe patriarchy is not natural. And I think something that's very interesting that came out recently is, the ages old story that we've told is that like men were out hunting, early human civilizations, men were out hunting and the women were staying home with the kids. And now we've learned that very recently that's not true at all. In fact, a lot of women hunted. And the reason that we believed that men hunted is because there's so much bias in the men doing the studies that they like failed to see that some of the bodies buried with the hunting tools were women. They were female, So like the story that we have told about patriarchy, it is older than obviously capitalism and white supremacy. Like it predates all of those. But the story that you have to tell to like keep that alive is like so much work. You have to completely keep telling this story that like men are naturally leaders and men are naturally the ones out there that are doing things, that are bringing the food, and the women are naturally just wanting to be homemakers and raise children. And like when you encounter enough people that don't fit those things, then how can you use the word natural? It's almost like the idea of masculinity. If masculinity were real, why is it so hard? Why is it so easy to be deemed unmasculine if you do one thing wrong? If you wear the wrong color shirt, like suddenly you're not masculine anymore. So like if masculinity were real, why would it be so hard?
Right, and it's because we've defined masculinity as subjugation of the feminine. Yeah. So in order to remain masculine, you have to have your boot on the neck of femininity. Otherwise, you're not a man. You have to get as far away from anything feminine as possible. Otherwise, you're not a man. And and that's where the homophobia comes from as well.
And it's like this narrow. It's a thing that continually narrows because masculinity is inherently anti-femininity, right? It's inherently what is not associated with the female. So as women expand, masculinity has to get narrower and narrower because it's like what has to be the things that women aren't. So masculinity ends up being so constrictive and so limiting that it limits the expression of men who are really trying to maintain this masculinity to such a tiny lane, like this tiny lane where they wear the right colors and they don't paint their nails and they talk a certain way and the only emotion they're allowed to show is anger, but they're allowed to show a lot of anger. Like it's such a narrow, uncomfortable place to live. And if you shove any human into a place that uncomfortable, like they're going to be miserable because that's not like the more expansive femininity gets, the more narrow masculinity gets because it's trying to be not femininity, right? And so, yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal for men,
And that's why men feel like, or some men feel like they're being emasculated just by women trying to live up to their greatest potential. It's like, whoa, you're trying to emasculate me. Wait a minute, I'm just seeking equality. But it feels like emasculation because you define yourself as anti-feminine.
Yes. Yeah. Like at the crux of your being, your worth, and this is why I think I experience more misogyny probably than the average person, not only because I grew up in Texas, it's very prevalent there, but also because men are told that their worth is based upon the fact that they're better than women, right? And white men are also told that, better than black men, blah, blah, blah. And rich men better than poor men, So when they believe that their entire worth is predicated on being better than another group of people, and then they encounter somebody in that other group of people that is objectively better than them at something, like when I was in school and I would outperform almost everybody in all of my classes, or I'm very athletic, if I would play men in tennis and beat them, these men, it would hit something in them so primal. Because on a deep level, they genuinely believed their only worth as a human was in their ability to be better than me. And if I was better than them at something, the rage I have encountered in my life, just because I am smart, I am accomplished, I am athletic, just my existence in those lanes triggers them so much because they go around the world telling themselves that Like they're better than all women. Like all those men who said they could beat Serena in tennis, right? They're walking around genuinely believing that they're better than women at everything that matters. And then when a woman is better than them at something, their whole identity crumbles. And I'm the one that ends up feeling that rage just because I'm doing what I want to be doing and it has nothing to do with them. You know, this is why I think the law is really misogynistic, because the law has winners and losers. So you go to court and you out argue a man and like the misogyny comes out because they're not supposed to lose to a woman. Right. It feels violent. It's so exaggerated. It's almost like a caricature. It's like, how can you lose it to this degree just because someone got the best of you today? Someone out argued you today, like whatever, you know, but their whole identity in one moment is like, I'm not better than all women. Shit. Then what am I?
Patriarchy is a belief system.
Yeah.
And the equivalent is, it's like you're telling them that their God isn't real. You know what I mean? Or that their God lied to them, because their God, their belief system says that men are supposed to be superior. They're supposed to be the head, not the tail. They're supposed to, all these different things that are superimposed on manhood. And now here's this woman doing this thing that's not supposed to be done by women. You know what I mean? So something's got to be wrong with her. You know what I mean? Something has to be wrong with what she's a witch. She's
a witch.
Yeah, it's like, and she's just talented. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's just intelligent. You know what I mean? Women
it turns out there are as many intelligent and talented women as there are men. Just historically, men have taken credit for their work, so we haven't heard about them. And historically, they haven't been allowed to shine in these ways. You know, I'm one of the first generations that was actually given the opportunity to thrive. And so you're seeing it for the first time, but it's always been there, right? Like it's always been there.
Yeah, and then so it hurts women because it's trying to put really both genders in a box, right? And so if you're a woman, you can't be athletic, you can't be super academic. If you're a man, you can't. I was talking to a group of gentlemen the other day, and we were talking about red pill, and a gentleman was talking about how he had a friend who was a dancer. You know what I mean? Beautiful dancer. Could see a dance on TV and just pick it up and do it. You know what I mean? In the club, wherever. And one day a man told him that, hey, that's not manly. You know what I mean? Men don't do that. You know what I mean? And never danced again. Just gave it up because he valued his perception, other people's perception of his masculinity was more important to him than the gift that he had from birth. You know what I mean? He's just a talented dancer. So you have men who are also in these boxes that are saying that, that would have been a ventilation shaft for him. But now he's just like you said, it's just anger, frustration. You know what I mean? Hey, those are acceptable emotions. And you wonder why some men explode, right? So it's not healthy for men either.
No, it's terrible for men. Like I have, with my content is mostly for women, and I learned that I didn't set out that way, but when I started talking about things, I realized my perspective is most useful in validating women and validating their experience and offering them an alternative narrative for that experience, one that is distinctly anti-patriarchal, because a lot of them have been believing the patriarchal story about their why their relationships failed because they're bad at love or they're bad at picking men, rather than maybe the relationship structure we set up is really bad, right? So I started making content for women, and then I'd like to address men sometimes and say, this is real bad for you too. But the problem I encounter when I do that is that men often take that as an invitation to center themselves in the conversation. Right. And to have their emotional suffering centered. And I don't have a problem sometimes centering them. There are appropriate situations to center men and to center men's suffering, to give room to that, to hold space for that, right? But the problem is if you're always needing to have your suffering under patriarchy centered without ever validating, acknowledging, or apologizing and taking accountability for the harm you've done women under patriarchy, I'm not really interested in engaging in that. I'm not really interested in using patriarchy harms men as a way for men to further avoid their own accountability in patriarchy, which is usually when I have these conversations, that's what happens. It's anytime I've made content before saying men, I have empathy for you. This is a tough time for you. I think you should contend with the fact that patriarchy is harming you too. And it always ends up off the rails with some guys being well, then why do you make all this content that hurts our feelings? As if you understand that patriarchy harms us, then you should stop doing anything that might hurt our feelings, which is to say, then you shouldn't be able to hold us accountable for our participation in it. And like, that's just really dangerous. And so I think men need to know that, like, you can hold space for both things. You can simultaneously say, like, patriarchy is harming me, patriarchy is limiting me, it's a net negative in my life, but also I have to take accountability for my participation in the ways that patriarchy does benefit me, and I have to do something about that, right? You have to do both things. You can't, you're not just the victim, and you're not the primary victim, you're the secondary victim, you know? And they really need to get that before they're actually going to be able to, like, this is the problem with, like, a lot of men who read A Will to Change, and then they come in and they're like, that's it, we're the victims, we need to be centered, we're the ones harmed. And it's like, well, yes, and yes, and you're still harming women when you do that, you know?
Right.
So it's nuanced. It has to be both at the same time.
Nah, as you were speaking, I was thinking about male rights activists and how, you know, they get, you know, very upset about some things that they perceive harm men. And yet at the same time will attack feminism. You know what I mean? Somehow it's still feminism's fault that all these things are happening to them. So you're going to avoid that accountability altogether, as you said. In dismantling patriarchy, you want the benefits of patriarchy. You just don't want the downside of patriarchy, the part that negatively impacts you, or the part where you have to do some work, or you might have to bleed, or anything of that nature. And it's like, well, wait a minute, these are the norms that men set in place. It may have not been you as an individual, but this is something men set in place. So why is your gripe with feminism?
Yeah, it reminds me of, like, the Christians who, like, cherry pick the Bible, who, like, they want to apply the things that they like and that help them and that make them feel better than other people, but they don't want to enforce the parts that basically say, like, don't have debt, forgive your debt, forgive everyone's debt, welcome immigrants, welcome your, you know, they don't want to listen to that part. They want to pick and choose. Right. I feel like with men, like, I say this in my all of my relationships, romantic relationships, have been with men who called themselves, like, super leftist, feminist, anti-patriarchal, all that, right? And out in the world, they would see another man being misogynistic, they would interrupt it, right? They would call it out. They would be like, that's a problem. They would see mansplaining, they would call it out, like, whatever, right? They were super proud of that. But we get into the home and it's like, I mean, this is where I draw the line, though, you know, like, they wouldn't admit this, but it was very much like, I mean, but I'm not going to clean. Like, I'm not gonna take an initiative and clean the house. Like, you're still gonna have to be the household manager. You're still gonna have to do the majority of housework, the majority of cooking, and you're still gonna have to do all the emotional labor of this relationship. I'm not doing any of that, you know? So it's like, they pick the parts of patriarchy, of being anti-patriarchal, that makes them feel good about themselves, that makes them feel better than other men. But the part that might actually take something from them and require them to give, they're like, no, I'm not doing that, you know? And I think there's a lot of men that are in this space right now who call themselves feminists, or at least agree with feminist ideology, but who fundamentally are unwilling to take the next step and do the hard things that requires. Right. They'll do the easy things that requires, but they're not going to do the hard things yet. And we need them to start doing the hard things, you know? And I think that's why women are, like, opting out of dating, is because until they do the hard things, you're still harming women by being in relationships with us. Right. So yeah, I think it's complicated. I think a lot of men need to really contend with that, because the vast majority of men who call themselves liberals, according to studies, still do 25% of the work of making a life when they're partnered with women. That's
powerful. And I think it's an indictment of men who make anti-misogyny a competition between other men, as opposed to it's the performative part of it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, of course I'm going to do that. But when you began this interview, you said, you know, masculinity doesn't exist. When you get to that point and you're like, wait a minute, what does that mean for me? Yeah. A part of your identity is still clinging to that. You know what I mean? It's a part of your identity still brings self-esteem from that. So yeah, I think that's a sobering thought. You know what I mean? And I think you're just, when you think you're there as a man in dismantling the patriarchy in you, you got more work to do. You know what I mean? There's always different layers. Always. So you have to wake up doing that work and continually do it. If you're not doing that work actively, you're going the wrong way. You're
I mean,
gonna,
it's the same with white supremacy culture. It was through TikTok that I learned about, I think it's 13 or 14 elements of white supremacy culture.
yeah,
One right way, right to comfort, sense of urgency, perfectionism, all of these things that I had never heard associated with white supremacy culture before. And when I started learning them and I realized how insidious they were, how harmful they were to me, how harmful they were to other people, the work of like tackling them is every day of my life. Every single day I catch myself engaging with perfectionism. Every single day I catch myself engaging with one right way. Every single day, either or thinking. And deprogramming. I mean, it's the baseline programming we were provided as children when our brains were in a literal hypnotic state. It is not our fault. But it is going to take a lifetime probably to undo it. And it's the same thing with patriarchy. And if men think, what I see with men is they want to be like, oh, I get it. Patriarchy is real. It's harming women. I have heard them. I have seen tangible ways. I get it. I'm on their side. Done. Right? Like that. I get that energy from so many men. And the reality is you're never done. Like none of us are ever going to be done. We're going to spend our lifetimes also deconstructing capitalism.
right,
Like this is lifetime work, and it's okay that it's lifetime work. The crucial part of it being lifetime work is that we're doing it so that we don't pass it on to future generations. We're not just doing it because someday we're going to be free from it. Maybe,
right.
but like the idea of us getting free from these three-headed snake is probably pretty slim. But we can get more and more free every day. We can walk in the direction of freedom every day. We're never going to finish, but maybe if we walk fast enough and far enough, the generations behind us won't have to walk at all. And
Right.
that is what we're really doing here, right?
No, absolutely. I wanted to ask you as far as because you have people that believe that they're allies, and maybe they're in that performative space or that performative stage, but then you have people that are just staunchly supporting patriarchy. And I wanted to see what type of arguments that are you presented with in support of patriarchy, and how do you refute those, or how do you address them when you encounter them?
So when I was in undergrad, I took this course called this sociology course about marriage. And this is where I learned everything about the institution of marriage, basically how it's basically like an institution of slavery that like makes women do a bunch of work, makes men do none, and benefits men almost exclusively. For those who don't know, like married men are healthier, wealthier, happier than single men by like a lot. They live longer. Married women are less healthy, less wealthy, less happy than single women. Marriage is an institution that takes from women and gives to men. And that is so contrary to the narrative that was told when I was growing up, which is that women chase men to make them marry them and to tie them down. And like marriage was for women and right? It's the polar opposite of that. And so I'm taking this class, and there was a guy in the class who was just like the most the most patriarchal, just like complete lack of self-awareness. And it was a little seminar class, so we argued all the time. So I was like the resident far left feminist, and he was like the resident on the other side. And one day he says, listen, this society doesn't work if somebody doesn't stay home with the kids. The society crumbles. And he said, and frankly, God gave you boobs. That's all I need to know. And I see this argument a lot, that the families aren't working the way that they are now. Somebody needs to stay home, and we have the feeding apparatus or whatever. But here's the thing about that, the fallacy that's within that. I said back to him, I said, God also gave me more ambition than you, and probably more intelligence than you. Is that a mistake? Is that a mistake? Not that I even believe in God, but is that an error? Is it an error that the universe or God made, that I came into this world not wanting children, but wanting to change the world? Because if you're going to use this fatalist determinist, biological determinativism, you have to contend with the fact that what happens to the people who can't have kids or who don't want to have kids, right? But the real fallacy of that argument is it's an argument against the nuclear family. It is not an argument against women's liberation, because it is true that the nuclear family, as we have set it up, cannot thrive really unless one person can afford to stay home. Everyone's going to be spread too thin. Everybody's going to be stressed. It's going to be never-ending work for all parties, mostly the women. It is terrible, but that is an argument against the nuclear family. That is not an argument in favor of patriarchy at all. And the idea that I hear from a lot of these red pill men is that like women would be happier if they weren't having to do capitalism. Well, everyone would be happier if we didn't have to do
Right.
capitalism. That has not that's a reflection of how oppressive and difficult capitalism is. But when we had women who didn't have that, who didn't have the anything, the opportunity to do anything other than be, home with the kids, those women were drugged to the nines. They were alcoholics. They were on so many pills because they were depressed and miserable. Like that wasn't some, like when people look back, and by the way, it was only white women doing that, right? Because black and brown women were always doing their labor for them and with them. So like a bunch of these like wealthier white women staying home with the kids, this idea that these men have of like the natural way of being, which is a very small group of people, like wealthy white women who could stay home with kids. And did so usually by exploiting black and brown bodies. Like those women were still miserable. Nobody was happy except the men. The men were happy because they got to like go off, play and pretend that they were the most important one in the family. Mm-hmm. And they'd come home and demand the respect and like deference of everybody in the family. And they'd be waited on hand and foot. And they felt like kings. They felt like kings. And like, that's what men really want. They want to go back to feeling like kings. And I'm sorry, but that ship has sailed. The ship has sailed. We're not heading to that future anymore.
Or even ain't she?
They can get on board, or we leave them behind. I'm done trying to persuade them at this point.
No, absolutely.
Just leave them behind.
And I think, I think that's a very common argument. That the proposed argument for the nuclear family, and women are destroying families by wanting independence, like, or however they. Many different variations of that. Another thing that I've encountered increasingly is men who, because they're losing that argument, and they're when you put apples to apples and you put logic against logic, it doesn't make sense. You can't really justify oppressing someone else. If you talk for too long, and you have the right, kind of a balanced, audience and a equal time at the microphone. They'll disengage by just co-opting women's movement nomenclature and just, make it a men's movement thing. So a gentleman in the comments section said drizzle, drizzle, right? Drizzle, drizzle is a variation of sprinkle, sprinkle. Women looking at, hegemony and saying, well, wait a minute, this is hypergamous. Looking at hypergamous relationships and say, okay, no, you need to get as much as you can out of this capitalistic system that's going to take advantage of you. So sprinkle, sprinkle, women being much materialistic because that's the way society's set up.
Pragmatic, yeah.
That's how, now I'm not necessarily a fan of it, but sprinkle, sprinkle, it caught on. So now instead of actually addressing and thinking like, wait, why are women acting like that? Why is sprinkle, sprinkle a thing? Maybe it's something that I'm doing as a man or this society that I participate in that's creating the atmosphere for sprinkle, sprinkle. It's drizzle, drizzle, just nonsensical.
You know what's hilarious about like the drizzle drizzle and the like 4G or 5G movement, whatever the guys are doing? All of it is just a reaction to women's movements. It's so hilarious that men are engaging with the idea that they are natural leaders and all they ever do is follow us. They can't come up with anything of their own. All they do is they hear something that like doesn't resonate with them. And instead of like thinking about it, engaging with it and coming up with a solution, they just reactively, drizzle, drizzle, and it's like honestly, sometimes when white men don't have to live these examined lives that people who are in various intersections of oppression have to live, because they don't have to contend with the story that the world tells white men is that the world is a meritocracy. And because they do well, they like that story, right? The story that like the world is a meritocracy and they're doing better than these other groups of people makes them feel good about themselves. So they don't examine it. But the rest of us, when the world says it's a meritocracy and I have to work like twice as hard as a lawyer to be given half the credibility of a male, well, obviously I'm looking into that, right? I'm examining that. I'm interrogating that. I'm digging, I'm researching, I'm learning, right? So to that end, like white men who are still engaging with the idea that there's some meritocracy, which is hilarious at this point with all the data that we have. But those men are the least introspective people on the planet, because they avoid introspection, because the story they've been sold feels so good. They don't want to look too closely. They don't want to look at the story. The story makes them feel good about themselves. And so in that way, they end up being the least wise group of people like in the world right now. And so engaging with them on these topics feels honestly a little bit like engaging with toddlers. Like the drizzle to me feels like a toddler movement. It's like you haven't even begun. I've spent 25 years thinking about these subjects, researching these subjects, like turning them over, looking at them from every angle, reading so many books, reading so many studies, and you've engaged with it for 15 minutes and you've decided you know more than us. And it's just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know, like just sit and listen, just listen. And maybe you'll get something out of it, you know, like just stop listening. That's like this idea that like everything that women say, they have to counter immediately. Just, if I could give advice to men, just take a pause. Don't say anything. It's the way that a lot of the black women on this app tell white women, put it in your journal, not in the comments, right?
Right.
That's the advice I have for men is just, if you're triggered, just sit with it. Think about it. Just don't we don't need your drizzle or your 5G or 4G, whatever we don't need. I mean, do it. We don't care. But like, take a moment to think before you just go into like reactive attack mode. Just give yourself that gift. Use it as an invitation. I know they won't. Most of them won't. I feel bad for them because they've been told their entire self-worth is predicated on being superior to us. And so like, that's the version of reality we're engaging with. And it's very hard to break through that. It's very hard.
No, and I said this about racism. Like racism will have you doing some it has very smart people doing very stupid things and coming to very foolish conclusions. You know what I mean? You could be brilliant, but because you're invested so much of yourself into a system of falsehood, it's literally based on falsity. You come to these very wide conclusions and you wind up trying to, even scientists will come up with these wild explanations for things that have no scientific basis. It's based on your conclusions. Men, before they even knew the 4B movement was out of Korea and what 4B stood for, they already came up with the 4G movement. It's like, really?
And we don't care. That's the thing, is that the 4B movement is not about men. The 4B movement, and really the American version isn't really traditionally 4B in the way that the Korean movement is, because like Korea's brand of misogyny is different than America's brand of misogyny. Right. I think they have it a lot worse than we do even. And so we should probably rebrand, but like we were already doing it, right? I called it the Great Divorce last summer and went viral and got like everybody's using that term, but like it's not about men. It's about women finally saying, we can finally live our biggest and brightest lives. We can finally pursue self-actualization. We can finally live these like vibrant dreams that we have. And if that's what we want, if we want these lives that are really well connected to our community, that are self-expressed, where we're making art, where we're making impact, where we're in service, if we want that life, the fastest way to get that life is to not partner with a man. And like, that's just the reality, because the moment we partner with men, we know statistically that we do 7 hours more of housework a week just because a man moves into our house. That's 7 hours we could spend connecting with community. That's 7 hours we could spend doing our art. That's 7 hours. I mean, it's like, that's significant, right? Yeah. And if you have kids, it's a lot. If you end up having kids, it's a lot more than 7 hours. So if we're trying, so women are just reaching their potential and men are taking an affront to it, because our potential means that we're no longer engaging with men who take more than they give. And it's not to punish men, and it's not retributive, and it's not manipulative. We're not trying to manipulate men into being better partners. Like that's what we've been doing for like the last 10 years. We're moving on now. And it's not about men. It's not about like, oh, let's get them, let's show them. It's not. It's about what if we get to dream? What if we get to live into our dreams? What if we get to have vibrant lives? And like the reality is that 95% probably of men are going to more likely to act as a barrier to your dreams than to help you actualize them. That's just the truth. I have partnered with men who loved me very much, who respected me tremendously, who thought I was wildly talented, And they still took way more than they would ever consider giving. And they slowed me down. You know, they slowed me down in every way. They made me less healthy. I didn't sleep as well. My house was always messy. Like and it wasn't like they intended. They weren't setting out with this intention of like, let's act as a hindrance to her. Let's be dead weight to this woman. But that's just what they were because they haven't deconstructed patriarchy far enough. Like until a man deconstructs patriarchy far enough, he's going to be a terrible partner. And women are realizing that, and we're opting out. And like men are acting like it's about them. It's not about them.
Man, so many questions are going through my mind right now, and I have them like later in the interview.
Yeah,
but I want to ask one now, just while we're on this topic of, because it's disheartening when I hear that just being with a man is going to make your life worse, right? So one question I have for you was, for a man that just heard that and an alarm went off, like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm in a relationship now. What if I'm doing that to the woman that's in my life, right? How can a man, in the process of dismantling patriarchy, lessen the negative footprint that they leave on a woman's life? Like what are some of the things that they can do to lessen that impact?
Yeah, there's a lot they could do if they're really willing to. And I've actually gotten DMs from men who said that exact question. I really don't. I love my partner and I don't want to be this dead weight to her. Like, can you help? Like, what do I do? Right. So there are men who earnestly don't want to be dead weight to their partners. And I believe that. I believe my ex earnestly didn't want to be dead weight, but he was, right? So I would tell them a few things. Number one, and this is where it's going to be very hard, is they have to admit to themselves. They have to admit to themselves that they believe they are more important than women. And because they almost all of them do on a subconscious level, because they've been taught it their entire life, right? Like every movie they've seen about people doing important things, like 90% have been men. Every story about leadership, men. Every story about war heroes, men. Every story about inventions, men. So like they're brainwashed early on to really think that men are the most important people in society. And like the reasons those things happened are obviously like because the storytellers are the people that are in charge, right? But because that's the messaging they have received their entire lives, on a subconscious level, most men, until they choose to deconstruct this, most men believe they're superior to women. And they believe that they are entitled to more than women on a subconscious level. Even the men on the left, even the feminists. So they need to admit that to themselves first. Until they admit it to themselves, the rest isn't going to happen. They need to say, I have centered myself in rooms of women and in partnerships with women, and start looking at, because once they admit that, then they can take an honest look of how they're doing it. Okay. And it's going to be in small ways and in big ways. So the how might be like you sit together watching TV, but you always watch what you want to watch, not what she wants to watch. When you're deciding what to go to dinner, like you pick what you want to, eat more than she wants to eat. But it's like, it's who takes initiative to take responsibility for the life that you're building. The mental load is almost worse than the difference in domestic labor, because the mental load is never ending. Your brain never turns off. You're always thinking of like, when is the dog's next vet visit? When is the insurance for the house due? Or like, when do I need to like get the car oil change? Like women are carrying all of this mental load, and men largely don't help with it. They largely just like let women, just tell me what to do. Give me a list, delegate to me. No. Absolutely not. If you are a grown ass adult and your wife or your partner or your girlfriend has to tell you to tie your fucking shoes, we're not interested. We're not interested anymore. Like that is, I need men to realize that just because you don't see the labor that goes into maintaining the mental load doesn't mean that it's not happening. That was way harder for me in my last relationship. I work relatively short hours because I own my own business. So I had time to do more domestic labor than my ex, who worked a lot of hours. And I didn't mind that. It was the fact that I had to do the mental load that killed me. That I had to keep track of his kids' birthdays, what we were doing for the birthdays, order the presents, plan everything for him, plan everything for the weekends, make sure that there was food in the house for them. Like the fact that I had to do all of that drained me, and it left nothing over like for my creative endeavors. And I had so many dreams, and he knew I did. He knew whenever I had a span of time when I wasn't overwhelmed with the mental load, I would be writing and submitting my work and like really trying to make something of that. But then I would be overwhelmed with running the family, and I would stop doing it for months at a time. And I would have health issues as a result of it. So like men need to realize that like you have to be an active participant in your life. And the best way that they can do this, honestly, is spend significant time single. Like if a man is jumping from relationship to relationship, he's probably not learning how heavy the mental load really is because somebody else is always doing it. So like men need to learn how to be single. Men need to learn how to take initiative. Men need to just contend with the fact that they aren't entitled to be centered in relationships. And they need to be honest with themselves about when they are centering themselves. Honest with himself, like a brutally honest, because a lot of the times it's like that's not real or whatever, and it's like the little things very much do add up to like that inequity, you know. And so yeah, I think it's a lot of work for men. I think it can be done, you know, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg's husband did it. He centered her career. He let her shine. He said, like, you are talented and passionate and you have a life mission. And I'm going to lean into supporting that and make myself secondary. Like, I'm not saying every man has to make himself secondary, but like, frankly, that's the only kind of relationship I would be in moving forward. I'm not even interested anymore in like an egalitarian relationship because my single life is probably better even than an egalitarian relationship. So in order for me to get into a relationship, I would like to be centered. I've centered men for 40 years. Their turn, as far as I'm concerned. And if that means I'm single the rest of my life, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm thriving. I'm happy. I'm more fulfilled, right? So like, for me, it's either that or nothing. But for a lot of women, egalitarian would be enough. But like, if it feels like it's egalitarian, it still may not be, right? Because like, you know, so I think one thing that I would need, because the problem isn't just men. The problem also is women. We are over conditioned to give. We are over conditioned. Like my biggest mistake in my relationships is that I would overgive and then I would resent them. But they didn't ask for all the overgiving, right? I was conditioned to do that. The call is coming from inside the house. That is on me. And so I have to take responsibility for the fact that I shouldn't be offering to like, what show do you want to watch? What do you want to eat? I should also take initiative to carve out my space in the relationship, right? So it's a two-way street, but it's hard when the conditioning has been since birth. I've been conditioned to think about everybody else in the room. Is everybody else in the room's needs met before I'm allowed to think of my own? And I've been trained to do that, and it is very hard to break it. So like a great thing that a man can do is to say, do you really want that? Like, are you really centering me right now? Or do you like push back against us when we are over centering or when we are over giving? Like, be the bumpers on the lanes that say, whoa, I feel like you might be over giving. I think you might be like taking too much on, you know? That's what I would need, frankly. I don't know about most women, but that's what I would need.
Those are strong tips. You know, as a married man, I made some of those mistakes. I made a lot of those mistakes, you know, and one of them was what you just said, you know, not because my wife wanted to see me happy. She would make concessions and not even tell me about them. I don't even know it was a concession. I just thought we were doing what was the right thing to do or what was the most logical thing to do, when she had a totally different idea, but either didn't want to see my reaction or knew I wanted something really bad. And so she would just give that to me. But then she would also want reciprocity, and she would want to see sometimes me do the same thing where, you know, I would make those same concessions for her. And because I'm centered, I don't even think those concessions need to be, or even worse, I think that making those type of concessions would make me less than a man and less than a leader. Yeah. And the entire idea of leadership is skewed because leadership is put out there as a front first, people follow me. And I'm defined by that as opposed to who serves the most as being the leader, who is looking at the bigger picture and caring about everyone as the leader. So, yeah, that was, I'm glad that, well timed. I was also thinking about evolution and how, you know, patriarchy 50 years ago, 75 years ago may look different than what it looks like now. And then some men will say, well, patriarchy doesn't exist. So I wanted to ask you, like, how have you observed patriarchy evolve over time, especially to counter like feminist thought and to accommodate for it?
Well, for a while, it was more insidious. It went underground a little bit. And that was my youth and my coming of age. That was the time when patriarchy created the cool girl. Okay. That was the time when the patriarchy said, like, Yeah, you don't have to be this like stay-at-home traditional woman. You just need to be like one of the guys. You just need to be effortlessly beautiful and drink beer and not care about what the guys say and just go with the flow. Like, and that sounded so like reasonable. And we all tried to do it at some point, like, when we were in our teens and early 20s. And so and then as a part of that, you have to be like super skinny. Like the only beauty is just thinness. That was it. They were synonymous. And it was unhealthily thin. And it was anyone that was like a size 6 or above was obese. And, so patriarchy and there, I've seen some interesting correlations. People have written articles about how whenever feminism is starting to get momentum, then all of a sudden a new body type comes into vogue, and that body type is always thinness. So like thinness as a body type, because like there's trends, which is wild that there's such thing as trends in women's body types, right?
Right.
But usually when you see the trend becoming thinness, what that is a reaction again to patriarchy, because if we can keep them dieting and hungry, they're not out there changing the world, right? And so for a while, patriarchy it took a different shape, right? Like if you think of all the movies in like the early 2000s, it was like just nothing but men objectifying women. Like if you look at 50 First Dates, like how this man, the protagonist that we're supposed to fall in love with, the whole opening sequence is him literally lying to a bunch of women to get them to sleep with him over and over and over again. And that made him a man. It made him a man that he was literally lying to obtain consent from dozens of women. And like that's our hero. That was our template for a male hero. And then the same thing in Wedding Crashers, right? Same thing. Like these guys, their value is in how many women they can lie to get them to sleep with them. It's like, so like that was what it looked like in my younger years. And when I was learning about was previous patriarchy, so I didn't spot that version of patriarchy, because I was like, well, it's not the same version where they're saying women have to stay home and can't have bank accounts and can't work and can't go to grad school. Like I didn't even recognize it as patriarchy until I was much older, because it was more insidious and it was very effective. So those were very hard years to grow up in. Very, very difficult years to be a young woman in. Now though, patriarchy, it's like on its last dying gasps. So these dudes are trying to go back to the beginning and revive the old hits. Like these dudes on TV, these politicians being like, women shouldn't have the right to vote. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like they're basically so out of runway. They're so out of creativity. They can't even come up with a better story to sell us. So all they're doing is just reverting to the original story of like, maybe women are hysterical and they shouldn't vote and they shouldn't own property and like they should be owned by the man. Like, I think it's like hilarious. And I think it's evidence that they know they've lost. Deep down, they know they've lost. You're never going to, these men saying this shit that like women shouldn't have the right to vote. Like 0.00001% of people are going to agree with you, but you're saying it out loud anyway, even though everybody else is going to hate you. Like, that's how desperate you are. And uncreative. How fundamentally uncreative you are. That's the best you got. Psh, bring it. Try me,
Losing the argument, it reminds me of the people that now that democracy is working for other people other than like white male landowners, it's like, oh, we got to get rid of democracy. It's the only way. It's the only way we can save America is to destroy America. We just got to get rid of it. And but it's a very dangerous because it's nothing like a corner animal. It's also a very dangerous place to be because when sexism doesn't work, when the you can't intellectualize it anymore, you can't justify it logically. Now there's misogyny and now there's violence because that's the only thing you have to fall back on. So it's on its last leg, but it's also on a very dangerous leg. And I want to admit, but yet it's still, even though that's where it is, there are still millions of men, I'm sure, that are saying, well, patriarchy doesn't exist and I don't participate in patriarchy, not all men. And it's like, wait a minute, you can't have it both ways. You can't both be the champion for patriarchy, cape and cow included, and then at the same time say, well, it's not me. I'm a good guy. But we want to maintain the good guy while being the villain, all the time.
Right. At this point, the men saying the patriarchy doesn't exist, they're not men who have open minds. If they had an open mind, even 1%, they would have learned, right? Like there's so much education out there. There's just so much data. It's just also just obvious when you look at the leadership of the world. Like, and so if you are a man who's still engaging with the delusion, like that patriarchy doesn't exist, I kind of look at you as like somebody who still believes in Santa. I don't consider you to be an intellectually credible or worthwhile person to speak to. Like those people, I'm no longer investing my energy in convincing them. Leave them behind. Leave them behind. And when they're ready, they'll catch up. Leave them behind. We need to just stop. Like those men, leave them behind. And like people say, oh, the violence is going to increase. I disagree, because the violence, most often the violence that happens to women happens from men that they're in relationships with or men that they know. Like 95% of grapes happen in romantic or people that we know, whether they're in relationships or whether it's a date or a guy we met at a bar. So if we stop doing that, that number's going to go down. Most of those men are not trolling the streets with weapons to like grape women in alleys. Those men are just doing it on dates and in relationships. So if we stop dating them, I think that number goes down. Also, the majority of violence done to women is done within romantic relationships, domestic violence. If we stop partnering and living with them, that number has to go down, right? Will there be some men who come out and punch women in the face in New York? Sure. There are going to be some men that desperate who go down the red pill, who, victimize themselves, whatever. But like the vast majority of violence is happening because we're letting them in our houses.
Right.
If we stop, I think violence goes down personally.
Awesome. No, I hope as well. I was looking at our comment section. This is a one-on-one conversation, just so that you're aware, between myself and Hope Peddler. So no guests coming up, in the box. But we will, look at some, some challenge, some questions or whatnot, and look at those questions as well as the comments every now and then. I saw a couple that were very interesting that I wanted to go back to.
I like this one. You're advocating for the desolation of society. Yes. I won't even fight you. Yeah. I burn it. Listen, we've let men run the show, and what are they doing? They're literally marching us to our own extinction on the planet, the only planet that we have. We've let men run the show, and what have we gotten but endless wars that harm people who didn't choose to go into the war in the first place? Like, we let men be in control, and what do we have? We have the greatest income inequality in the history of the planet Earth. We have people who could literally live like 82,000 lives without ever working again, and then we have people, babies, who cannot eat food. And like any world that looks like this with men in charge, and you want to pat yourself on the back and say this is a good world, yeah. I mean, like we gave you your shot, like rich white men, we've given you your shot, and you have fucked everything. It's like I can't even imagine. Like we're on the verge of nuclear war. I can't even imagine a world that's worse than the one you have created. Like if I were grading your performance, you would have an F. It doesn't get worse than this. So like literally let anybody else run now. Let anybody burn it down. Let anybody else. I will turn the keys over to anybody but wealthy white men. Literally anybody. Children. Anybody but wealthy white men.
Big facts. It's like one commenter said, society wouldn't work without patriarchy. And it's like, what? Yeah, no successful society without patriarchy.
Yeah, actually, there was a society that lived in the central Mexico in a place called Teotihuacan, and it was a matriarchy. It started as a matriarchy, and it was one of the longest lived, if not the longest lived, egalitarian society in the history of humanity. It lasted 500 years as an egalitarian society, and what they found was everybody had equal sized houses, everybody had equal access to resources, everybody made art. And do you know what their art showed? It showed people eating mushrooms and rainbows coming out of their heads, which I think is very interesting. But yes, it started out as a matriarchy because women showed the way into it being egalitarian. And then it didn't even need to be a matriarchy anymore because everybody accepted this egalitarian way of living and everybody got to participate in leadership. And the leadership was done by like councils. It wasn't like people making decisions for everybody else like we have. It was women facilitating the discussion of what's best for us. And then everybody deciding together what was best. So we have plenty of histories of matriarchy. There was a matriarchy in modern day Ukraine that was only 100 miles away from a patriarchy, and they traded with each other. And the matriarchy was egalitarian. They had equal-sized houses, they made art, they all ate well. And then the patriarchy 100 miles away was so violent that they found an entire room of severed skulls. Okay. And these two societies knew about each other. They traded with each other, and the matriarchy stayed egalitarian despite having the influence. So this matriarchy looked at the patriarchy and was like, nah, we're not doing that. So we have plenty of historical matriarchies. So anyone that says matriarchy can't work, all I know about you is you've never read anthropology. So do some research.
There you go. Speaking of, I guess, different societies, I wanted to ask you about some of the legal precedents that were previously put in place to keep men in power and marginalize women.
Yeah. I mean, the two most effective ways to exploit women and keep them from access to power is reproductive health and access to the economic system, right? So before women had the absolute right to have banking, to it was literally in our parents' lifetime. My mother was a teenager when women were still not allowed in every state to have bank accounts, right? Like, how can you possibly have anything remotely approaching equity if you can't even have money in this society, right? So that was a big one. And then, reproductive choice, because frankly, if women are kept, okay, first of all, so marital rape was not illegal. It wasn't even considered rape. It was just considered his right. So you had that. And then up until 1965, in Griswold v. Connecticut, you didn't have birth control. Birth control wasn't legal. So you had men that could literally force women to be in a perpetual state of pregnancy. And how are women ever going to access any power when they're in a perpetual state of pregnancy? Many of whom dying in pregnancy. But even those that survived, when you have one kid after another, that's going to take 100% of your focus and your time. And you are never going to, have any success. So those two things, the combination of, lack of reproductive freedom and lack of access to capital and participation in the economy are probably the two biggest things. And obviously, if we go far enough back, 100 years back, or, a shorter time period, if you're talking about Black women, the right to vote, obviously too, that goes in there. But even in modern times, the lack, you couldn't open a credit card or bank account without your husband or father's signatures.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. That's wild.
Not that long ago.
Imagine you're a 50-year-old woman and a 25-year-old banker says, "Where's your father at?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Where's your father?
It's wild, I consider it such a divine luxury to live alone, because probably thousands of generations of women have dreamed about being able to live live a life that is not in service of somebody else, and they would have killed for it, right? Some of them did kill for it, right? And we get to live this now, and it's new. We are the first people who really can afford to not commit our lives to being in service of men, and it is beautiful,
Absolutely. Why do you think there's a push to overturn? This is kind of an obvious question, but why do you think there's a push to overturn longstanding decisions like Roe v. Wade and increase social restrictions now on women?
I think it's twofold. I think they're desperately worried about worker bees, right? Capitalism needs consistent workers. And since people are not able to afford to have kids and they're choosing not to, they're just going to try to force us into parenthood. Force people into parenthood that don't otherwise want to be in parenthood. But it's also a reaction. It is also a reaction to this wave of feminism. It is also a last desperate attempt to siphon some of the power, some of the gains that we have made in the past 10 years. They're just, I am to some degree shocked that they've been effective at doing it.
Right.
But I haven't been shocked that there are men out there who want it. There are always men out there who want it. Small, insecure men whose only self-worth comes from their their ability to convince themselves that they are inherently superior to women and that they need to control women in order to feel like a real man. Like, I feel bad I can't imagine walking through life that insecure. And I feel bad for them. But at the same time, like, they're doing very real harm. And so, leave them behind. Leave them behind. They're irrelevant.
And for the men that are listening now that think or will posit publicly that, oh, I'm not, it's just a certain group of bad faith actors that make patriarchy, this terrible thing, or they want to separate themselves and say not all men every time a woman speaks about something that affects them. Mm-hmm. If you're in a country where a woman's reproductive rights have been effectively banned, you are a part of the patriarchy. If you're not screaming at the top of your lungs to bring it back, if you're not, fighting tooth and nail to do that, and you're just passively remaining silent, yep, you are a part of that problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Silence takes supports the oppressor as it is, right? Like, if you see harm being done and you stay silent, you are taking the side of the oppressor. You are allowing the oppression to continue. But more than that is, I think men don't even recognize the myriad ways they uphold patriarchy. Every time a man makes an off-color joke about women or objectifying women and you don't call him out, you are upholding patriarchy. And you are making it more likely that a woman is going to have physical violence done to her. So, like, every time you have laughed at a joke at women's expense, you are literally doing harm to women. Furthermore, in your relationships, when you are requiring your female partners to do all of the labor, you are patriarchy. I don't care if you call yourself a feminist. That word is so empty if you're still acting out patriarchal precedent. I have no interest. You think women are equal, but, like, when you get at home, like, I just don't notice when the bathroom's dirty. Like, the fuck you do. Go clean it, like, take initiative. Like, be that leader. We're leaders, except we need our wives to delegate every little thing that we do. No, be a leader. Take initiative. Do your life. Take initiative in your own life at home, not just at work. Like, be that leader that you claim to want to be, right? I think, the not all men thing, the biggest problem with saying not all men is it centers men in a conversation about women's experience. So when we come on here and we share vulnerably our experience with men, the harm that men have done to us, and men come in and they say, well, not all men, what they're saying is, I will not extend you empathy until you exonerate me. My exoneration is more important than the empathy that you deserve. First of all, when we are telling these stories, we are never saying all men. When I tell the story of all the men that have tried to SA me, I'm not saying every man alive has tried to SA me. I'm just saying these men did this thing. So if you come into my comments and you're like, no, man, what you're saying is, I'm a big baby who can't do empathy until you center me and my need. So I'm not gonna feel bad for you. I'm not gonna try to make the world safer for you until you tell me I'm not the problem. This is what I mean when I say, like, right now, dealing with this group of men feels like I'm dealing with a toddler. Like, this is why the 4B movement is like, it's effortless. We are not having to convince ourselves not to date these men. We have the ick because men are acting like fucking children. Like, if you have the depth of a 3-year-old, I'm never going to be attracted to you. I'm never going to want to touch you. I'm going to be disgusted by your very presence. Like, if you are treating women that way, like, if you're laughing at these, like, off-color jokes, like, gross, ick, absolutely do not pass go. Get out of our lives, right? And, like, we're all waking up at the same time. We're all getting the same ick. We're not even having to, like, try not to date men. Most of them are just making themselves as unattractive as humanly possible.
How can you be attracted to someone who doesn't want to fight for your human rights? You know what I mean? Who wants to take away your rights?
Be attracted to someone who doesn't recognize your humanity.
Right.
Gross. And also, it's gross as in it harms me, but I also doubt your intellect. And I'm not going to be with someone who's dumb. And, like, if you haven't had the intellectual curiosity to look around this world and learn about it, you're not smart enough for me. Sorry. You're not smart or curious enough for me. Like, that's gross. Like, if you've managed to live in this world and you've never looked around and been like, is this right? If you've never done that, you're boring. Like, you're not a curious person. And I'm not interested. That's not attractive.
Can you talk a little bit about your personal journey and, like, how you came to this awareness? Like,
yeah, it's a great story. I was raised by a man in a conservative white suburb of Texas, who he would never use the word feminist to describe himself, but to date is the most feminist man I've ever met in my life. And he would call himself a conservative, but that man, growing up, my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and my parents lived for us. Like they were so thrilled to be parents. It was they were in a state of joy. My dad woke us up singing songs he made up every day. My dad was a corporate executive that would come home early for work for every single game that we had. And each of us played like 3 sports. We were in the band. He never missed a single game. He coached our teams. Our mom was like team mom, classroom mom. My mom wrote a play and performed it for my school just for fun. And my mom was a beauty queen. She was charismatic. Like everybody loved her. And like my childhood was so good. And my dad was so... like she was a stay-at-home mom, but he did so much cleaning. He would come home and vacuum and clean to help her out. He would change diapers. His dad shamed him for changing diapers because his dad was so patriarchal, conservative, Baptist. And my dad was like, nah, I'm helping my wife, you know? So even though she was a stay-at-home mom, my dad was in charge of all of the weekend, cooking. He would cook for these big fun meals for us on the weekends. And he was also always centering my mother. My dad was always saying, hey, your mom put this party on. Make sure you thank your mom. Hey, your mom, my dad was pointing out invisible labor constantly and telling us to thank our mom for it constantly. Right. And I've never met another man like this to date. Right. And if you ask my dad if he's a feminist, he'd be like, no, he would say no, women are just superior and should be in charge. That's what he would say. He says this very pragmatically. He said, as a corporate exec, he would hire entire teams of people. And he said, if I was interviewing people, all other things being equal, I would hire the woman. And he said, and it wasn't out of some loyalty to women. It was because if a woman has gotten as far as a man, she's more competent. He's like, so if I want the most competent people on my team, I hire women. So he would have entire teams of women, and not in a sexual harassing way. He was not like that at all. But he was just thought women were more competent. And so he treated me like that growing up. So he treated me like this. I had an older brother, but I got all the attention. And so my dad never said you could be anything you want, even as a woman. My dad was just you're so talented, you can do anything. And so that's what I grew up with. Right. And then I enter the world. And when I started working in restaurants at 16. I was a hostess and a server, and the world was not like that.
Right.
It was so abrupt. It was they say a frog in hot water, you just get used to it. Well, I wasn't in hot water. And then I get into the world, and pretty much in Texas especially, every man I interacted with did one of two things to me, or both. They either objectified me sexually, just reduced me to the number of 50, 60, and 70-year-old men that sexually harassed me in those jobs as a 16-year-old, it'll make your fucking blood curl. It's gross how many of them I was constantly sexually harassed. And then the other group would condescend to me and act like I was stupid. I would engage with these men who, knowing nothing, we would be having a conversation like this, and on knowing nothing about me, they would just be like, you silly little girl. Everybody would talk down to me. Everybody acted like I wasn't a serious person, even though I was probably smarter than most of them and more well-researched than most of them. And they all treated me like I was a second-class human. And it was so stark to me because I had grown up with a person who never treated me that way. And so I get out into the world, and I got ragey fast. I walked out into this world, and I was the refrain in my head as a late teenager was constantly, who the fuck do you think you are to talk to me that way? Every man I interacted with, it was, who the fuck do you think you are? Constantly. And then I get to college. Part of the reason, I kid you not, part of the reason I went to an Ivy League law school was so that every man from that moment forward, I could be I went to an Ivy League law school. Shut up. Right? Because I was so tired of being treated like I was an idiot by these men in the South. I was so tired of them treating me like I was so stupid because I had breasts, It was wild to me, the difference in the way that I was treated. So then I get to college, of course, and I take a bunch of women's studies courses, and I went from internalizing that rage to understanding that it was systemic. So I went from this place of being I didn't have the word misogyny, but I felt it. And it made me so ragey, but I didn't have the language for it. I did not understand it was a universal experience experienced by a lot of women. I thought it was a me problem. I thought I was doing something to trigger all these men to objectify me. It was my fault. Maybe I was too, like, whatever, right? I was too flirty. That's what the story I told myself, because I was very friendly, that I was too flirtatious. And that's why all these men harassed me. I told myself that, like, maybe I was too confident and that was off-putting, or maybe I was too assertive and that was off-putting. So I had these stories that I had internalized in my rage as a teenager. And then when I get to college and I take these women's studies classes and I understand, oh, these are systemic parts of the patriarchy. This is misogyny. This is, sexual harassment. That's when I learned, oh, it's not a me problem. It's an us problem. We're in this together. And that fundamentally changed my approach to it, and maybe a little less ragey, because I understood that it wasn't personal, So then I go to law school and I like take all the more classes and I start doing all the research and all the things. I took so many gender studies classes that I accidentally got a minor in it without even trying. My advisor was like, "You've taken so many of these classes," and I'm like, "Well, I just wanted to learn, So.
That's what's up.
Yeah, that's my journey. That's my journey to be. So then 20 years ago, I was running around telling everybody, marriage is for men. It's not for women. And everyone, even the leftists, were like, you're crazy. You're crazy. And I'm telling everybody, you don't understand. The stats show marriage harms women and it helps men, because we had the data back then. Even in egalitarian relationships, when they call themselves egalitarian, she does literally twice as much housework as him. And I'm telling everybody this, and I'm telling everyone why I'm not going to get married, and telling everybody all of this shit, and no one believed me. And I was just I spent 20 years trying to convince people of this reality, and no one believed me. And then TikTok happened, and they started to believe me, because everybody else was having the same conversation. And it finally was aha, we have all arrived. We are now finally having the right conversation. I waited for this for 20 years of my life, It feels so validating to have everybody waking up, all these ladies in solidarity with us.
That's what's up. Yeah, that's probably one of the reasons why they want to take TikTok away or change over to management, because it's I
think it's the primary reason. I think this wave of feminism and the deconstruction of white supremacy and capitalism, that's it.
Yeah.
People are deconstructing from those three systems so fast, so rapidly, they're terrified. I would be. If I were them, I would be terrified. It's happening way faster than we could have ever imagined. It's on lightning scale. We are doing a generation of change in a 2-year period. What would normally take a generation in human history. And we've done it in 2 years. They have no idea what's coming for them.
It's a wonderful thing. You said it. It was when the shift came from you thinking that it was something wrong with you. Because that's what the system does. Oh, it's something wrong with you. Oh, you're poor? Oh, it's because of you. You're not working hard enough. That's why you're poor. It's not a systemic thing. Oh, you feel like you're being ousted because you're black. No, it's just a you thing. It's because of your culture that you're being unalived and things of that nature. Nope, it's systemic.
Mm-hmm. It's so freeing when you realize it's systemic.
Yeah,
there's so much freedom. You can disengage from the story. There's something wrong with you. Women now are just realizing that with regard to romantic relationships, because women have internalized the failure of their romantic relationships as I'm bad at picking partners, or I'm bad in relationships. I'm too needy in relationships, or I'm too naggy in relationships. Women have been telling themselves that story for my entire life. And now women are oh no. Most men are just taking more in relationships, and they're not showing up as equal partners. That is the actual reality. And it's freeing women from this story that there's something wrong with them. The nuclear family is just a bad idea. And the nuclear family specifically in a heterosexual context is a real bad idea. It works for a very few amount of people. There are exceptions, of course, but it works for a very few people. Really, really works. And so, yeah, women are waking up and they're disengaging from the story that it's their fault. And I love it. Love it.
So for the women that are listening, what does dismantling patriarchy look like in real time?
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do ourselves, right? We have so much work indeed, because it's not that patriarchy only brainwashes men, it brainwashes us too. It has brainwashed us to be we were all kind of taught growing up through the world around us that we are supposed to consider everybody else's needs besides our own. Like, we are constantly told that we have to consider everybody else's needs. So like, I even find I have to catch myself when I go like stay at my best friend's house. I will like clean the dishes, cook, go buy groceries for her. I'll do all this stuff because I feel like I need to be in service of somebody because I'm sharing space with them. And I feel like I'm not really allowed to rest unless I make sure that I'm putting everybody's needs before my own. And women need to work on that. I'm working on that all the time. It's the primary reason why I'm going to be living alone for a long time, if not ever, because I don't know that I cannot do this. I don't know there's a version of me where I don't center other people's needs over my own. And I'm tired of putting myself last. So the only way to put myself first is to not let other people live in my house, honestly. So I think women have to contend with that. I think women, like we have, like, I think it's coming to a crescendo and going to go the other way, but women have to stop this obsession of trying not to age. The energy, money, time, resources, anxiety that we put into that is ultimately harmful. And not that I would ever judge women for doing it, because I understand we aren't doing it for men. We are doing it for relevance. We want to remain relevant in a society that says we're not relevant once there's evidence that we are over the age of 40. So women are not like, oh, I just want to be able to attract men. No, they don't want to be dismissed. They don't want to be rendered invisible. It is literally a fight for survival. It is like a Pavlovian response to our own erasure as human beings. This thing that we do to try to not look like we're aging. However, it's coming, like, it's gotten to a point with like the level of plastic surgery and the level of stuff that's happening where you can feel it on TikTok. There's some pushback against it. Like, we're homogenizing beauty. Everybody's going to look exactly the same because everybody's going to have the same filler, the lip filler, the Botox. We're basically taking this range of faces and we're all aiming for this like very narrow face. And maybe that's not great, maybe that's not great. So that conversation needs to continue happening. It's going to take us a long time, but that conversation needs to continue happening. Like, what if it's okay to get older? Like, what if it's okay, and what if we can make each other not irrelevant and not invisible? And the young women, the Gen Z women on this app saying things like, y'all listen to the older women, the women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are the wise ones. Like they're not bitter. They just know more than we do. Those are the women that are breaking this cycle. Because if those women, the women in their 20s, fight for our relevance, women in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, right, they are building a world where they won't have that pressure to not age. And they are doing it. And I see so many of them doing it. And I think it's beautiful. I'm rooting them on. Like, they're basically telling us, like, there's been predictions made by a lot of Gen Z forecasters that like women in their 40s and 50s are going to be the big TikTok stars because they have so much to teach us, like make older women relevant. We are wiser. Trust me. The women older than me, wiser than me, right? Like it's almost like you learn more the longer you live. So
yeah, it's crazy. Like, we punish each other for growing older, like for living longer. It's like, wait a minute. No, my life's not over at 40. My life's not over at 50. This should be desired.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, oh, you're not 30 anymore, so forget about you.
Yeah. I mean, like my mother's generation, they had it the worst, the complete invisibility and irrelevance once they pass that age, like I'm right on the precipice of like, it might be changing in my lifetime. I might maintain my relevance as I age. I can feel it. I can feel that I probably will. Thank you to the younger women.
Yeah.
No thanks to a lot of the men, but we don't need the men because like we are really moving towards matriarchy. And women, the conversations amongst women are going to be the most relevant conversations, and I'm going to be in those. So
let's talk a little bit about like what does that look like? What is matriarchy for the uninitiated, and how does that change the way society functions? Because I hear a lot of, especially men, talk about matriarchy as if it's just patriarchy with women instead of men on top.
It's completely different structure. If you look, anybody that wants to learn about matriarchies, I really encourage you to read some anthropology about historical matriarchies. It's beautiful. But typically matriarchies tend to be egalitarian because they are not power hoarding. So what men are accustomed to in a patriarchy is that the men who get power hoard that power to use it for their own benefit. When women get power, what is the priority of most women? Their children,
Yeah.
their future, the future of the, right? Even those of us that don't have children, the future generations become our priority, right? So women, when they get into leadership, they center the future of civilization. They center the children, and they don't center themselves. Whereas, like, leadership by women, if you study leadership by women, it tends to be collaborative, cooperative, like creative. It's more about like women facilitating discussions about what's best for everybody. The female leadership tends to be women being like, I will just lead the discussion, but everyone participates in the discussion and we hear everyone and we listen to everyone. Whereas when men are in leadership, they only want to hear from people that are just like them. They control discourse, they control conversation, they hoard power, they hoard resources, they embed their own power for the sake of their own power and for nothing else. Like all these power hoarding men and these wealth hoarding men, I always want to just smack them across the head and be like, to what end?
Right.
What is the point of this power hoarding? What are you going to do with this power other than end our ability to exist on the earth, which is what they're doing with it? But like, what are you going to do with all this power that you have? What for? Is it just really for your ego? Is all of like Bezos? What are you doing? Is this genuinely all entirely for your ego? Like, are you like, what's the point of the power? Is it just to make you feel better about yourself? Whereas women, like, I would love to have power. It's so funny. My sister is like an organizational psychologist. And she said to me one time, of all of the traits that drive you, the biggest trait that I have noticed that drives you is power. And she goes, but that's not bad. And I'm like, I don't think it's bad. I love it. I don't shy away from the fact that I want power and influence because I trust myself to use it. I trust myself. I trust my integrity more than I trust anybody else's. I know I will never sell out. I don't even care about money enough to sell out. I know I will not sell out for my ego because I have found internal validation. I don't need the validation of anybody else. So I'm not selling out to get the validation from somebody else. I am whole in that way. I have healed that in myself. So because you can't buy me with validation, you can't buy me with money, like, yeah, give me power because I will use it the way that I will use it to decentralize power. So the whole thing about matriarchy is decentralized power. We don't vest it in a small group of women who control everybody else for their own benefit. We let women lead for the benefit of everybody, which is why the majority of historical matriarchies or matrilineal societies end up being more egalitarian than patriarchies. Because women care. They care about children. They care about the community. They're not just like, how can I make my life better? You know?
Wonderful. And it's crazy because sometimes it doesn't even make your life better.
I know. It makes it worse. Like one of the greatest gifts that I had was like in my 20s, I lived in LA and I worked with a bunch of really wealthy people and they were like the most miserable people I've ever met. And I was like, ew, money doesn't buy happiness, clearly. Like I'm talking like these were very, very wealthy people and they were very, very, very unhappy. And I was just like, yuck. You know? And so once you disengage from that illusion that money buys happiness, statistically, money will buy you happiness up to the point where all your needs are met. And once your needs are met comfortably, any increase in money does not increase your happiness at all. So.
What's your purpose?
Exactly.
What do you have to give to the world?
We all have a need to create. Even if it's just creating connection and community. But most of us, it's art. We all have this embedded within us, and most of us don't express it. And most of our unhappiness comes from our failure to express that creativity. And we are trying to fill that creativity hole with consumerism, food, shopping, alcohol, drugs, like, caffeine. We are trying to fill that hole, but that hole is creativity. It's not, but capitalism wants us to fill it by buying shit,
Right.
And as soon as people learn that they are going to be much happier if they sit in a room and paint for a day than if they go on a shopping spree, as soon as people start to realize that, capitalism crumbles. It's done.
It starts right in this room.
Yeah.
For everybody that's
why I'm
listening.
doing this,
So, and we've talked a little bit about this, and I think for the men that are listening, they should have picked up on several different things that they could do at this point. But what would be your advice to would-be male allies looking to partner in this work of dismantling patriarchy? Especially like pitfalls. Like, what are some of the pitfalls that you see men fall into who say that they're dismantling patriarchy and yet, sometimes like will fall off the wagon or not necessarily produce the best work in doing that?
Yeah. I think the biggest problem is at an intersection with white supremacy, which is kind of like either or thinking. Men often binary thinking. Men like to perceive themselves as either good or bad. All men, they want to put in a good man or a bad man category. Women do this too, because we're all in white supremacy culture, right? He's a good man, he's a bad man. That's it. No nuance. There's no such thing as a good man or a bad man. Everybody is just on a spectrum of deconstruction. That's it. Everybody is just on either you haven't started it and you're unsafe. I won't call you bad, but I'm going to call you unsafe if you haven't started your deconstruction journey. If you're the further you get in your deconstruction journey, the safer you get for women. So like, I need men to reject the good, bad binary. I need men to stop saying I'm a good man. I need them to stop even engaging with the idea that they're one of the good ones. Just stop. All you're doing is walking the line of deconstructing patriarchy, and you should be bringing as many men along with you as you possibly can, in a nutshell. So I think that's a big one. And I also just think, obviously, like, if you are a man and you don't get something, just listen. Stop talking. The moment you don't understand something is when you need to stop talking and start listening. And listen for a long time before you talk again. Because often when they hear something that they don't fully understand, they want to argue against it. And they're immediately arguing against it. And they think that they have thought as deeply about it as we have. It's like a white person saying that they understand racism like a black person does. You haven't. You don't understand it. So if there's something that is rubbing you the wrong way, shut your mouth. Listen. And that's really hard for men to do because, there are studies showing that like in a college classroom, when they measure like how much women and men speak, if women speak 50% of the time, men will all say women spoke 75% of that class. When women speak 25% of the time, men will say women spoke 50%. They always perceive that women are talking more than they actually are and that they are talking less than they actually are. So they need to err on the side of saying less.
I like that. And I think even if you think if you think you understand, still listen.
Yeah.
Because centering women, when you center women, you allow women take that stage. You're also centering the deconstruction of that entire system. So if the world becomes better for women, then the world becomes better for men as well. You know what I mean? Because now because patriarchy dehumanizes everyone. Yeah. You know what I mean? So if you get rid of the primary person that is dehumanizing, i.e. women, it will also not dehumanize you as much as well. So
yeah. Like if men, my dad says this all the time, even though my dad considers himself a conservative Republican, like if you take him issue by issue and on every issue he's leftist, it's wild. But he's in Texas, so he has to call himself a conservative. But he will say, just let women be in charge. The world would be so beautiful if we just let women run things. Like give them their shot. Like you don't understand how beautiful we can make shit. Like for real though, especially if it's not white women, but like it definitely needs to be more of a melanated matriarchy. But that's for the same reason, right? That's for the same reason that like black women understand white supremacy more than white women do. It's the same reason that women understand patriarchy more than men do, right? So like, and disabled folks understand capitalism more than the able-bodied people, right? So like we need people at that more intersections because they understand the systems of oppression better. And like they'll be there to explain those to us, That's not to say that we can't all participate. We should all be participating. Absolutely. Like, there's this wave of women online saying something that I actually disagree with, which is that men should not be speaking on feminist issues. And I just wholeheartedly disagree with that because like we desperately need men speaking on these issues. The problem becomes when those men pander more to women than to men. That's right. The problem. But as long as those men are earnestly trying to reach men, even if a lot of their following ends up being women, like we need that so badly because there are still a certain sect of men who only consider men credible or consider men more credible than us. So we have to have men doing this work as well. So.
Absolutely. And assume that a woman already said it.
Yeah.
Assume that a woman has already said it. You know what I mean? Just give the, if you don't know who said it, give the credit, because women have been dealing with this on an intimate level for so long. So many women have said it. And it may seem like an epiphany to you. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, wow, this just, but no, women have been saying it. It's just that we were not listening.
Yeah.
We were not reading, women read literature. We were not ingesting that type of media. And so, some of the thoughts that come from ingesting that media is like, oh yeah, this starts to click and this starts to click. But that's a 20-year-old click. That's a 30-year-old click. But it seems to be to you.
Yeah. Dude, I had this one guy. I was talking about these studies subjects that I've literally been studying since I was 22 and I'm 44. And so I'm giving an overview of all these studies on this topic. And this man was like, I haven't heard of any of these studies in the comments. And I said, okay, look these 3 studies up. Okay. That fool comes back 15 minutes later and he goes, after reviewing all of those studies and digesting all of the relevant studies, I can see that there's a flaw in all of them. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're 15 minutes where there is no way on earth you've read even one of those studies, let alone all 3 of them, or let alone the other studies that have backed them up. But he decided that after 15 minutes, which he called extensive research, he said after extensive research, literally 15 minutes, I hereby declare that wrong. It's like, oh, my 20 years is nothing. Your 15 minutes. Because you're a man, your peen makes your brain work faster. I guess you've unraveled my 20 years of study in 15 minutes. Where do I worship, big man? Like, oh God, like that's what they expect of us, to be like, you must be like so right, It's wild.
So when you talk about your thoughts on how the following institutions are still leveraged to marginalize women and or reinforce male dominance, where do you fall on religion?
I grew up religious. I was like diehard until I was like 16, 15. I mean, like I tried to like convert people. I taught Sunday school. My whole social group was religious. And then I deconstructed really rapidly when a church leader tried to sleep with me when I was 15 on a church camping trip. Literally came into my tent, crawled into my sleeping bag. And I'm like a 15-year-old girl, He was only 20, but still, he was in training to be a leader. Anyway, I faked snoring because I didn't know what else to do. So I was like faked asleep and he left. And then literally 3 months later, he got a high schooler pregnant. And she had the baby. So like that was sort of one of the beginnings, is I was like, then in the church, every man that I dated, it was like, I guess boys that I dated in high school, they were like, you're so ambitious. That's so cute. You can pass that on to our kids. And I was like, I think there's other uses for it too. And they're like, not really. And I was like, what? Like they just like all of the men that I engaged with in religious spaces treated me like a less than human. And so that was it was basically feminism that made me wake up to the fact that religion wasn't for me. And then I had my first gay friend. And then, like, I saw the pain because he lived in the South too, and I saw the pain that he went through by virtue of religion, like how it almost took his life. And I was like, yeah, religion is stupid. Like now it's almost silly to me that like, and this is gonna piss some people off, but like the idea that there's like an old white man in the sky, like, yo, he made humans in his image, but like there were no white humans for how long? Right? Like all of the early humans were not white, but he's a white guy in the sky. And it's just so happened that the God we have constructed reflects the current power holders, right? Like, first of all, if there was a God, the God wouldn't have a gender. If the God did have a gender, it would be like female, because we give life, we create life. So but I think it would be more likely that if there was a God, there would be no gender. So I just think the idea of it now feels kind of silly to me, that I engaged with it so intensely that there was this like literal old white man in the sky deciding who suffered and who thrived, and happened to dole out that thriving and that suffering along lines of race and gender. Like that looks real cruel. That looks so cruel. Like you're gonna make poor kids starve, and you're gonna like kill black kids, have cops kill black kids, and you're gonna have women suffer domestic abuse at the hands of men. Like that's how you dole out privilege and suffering.
Yeah.
Like if there was a God like that, I don't want to go to that heaven. Absolutely not.
And don't forget, it's your fault.
Yeah,
It's your fault that this is happening to you,
because I
right?
didn't
Because
have
you're a
one.
sinner. Isn't it convenient that that's the same way oppressive systems work? Since oppressive systems convince it that it's your fault, and so does God. God, it's your fault. You're the
Mhm.
reason. I would challenge any religious person to imagine God as a woman. You know what I mean? Because you'll be able to see very quickly what's real and what's fake when it comes to your spirituality. Because if you can't imagine God as a woman, if you can only imagine God as a man, or if you can only imagine God as white, or if you can only imagine God with two arms and two legs and eyes and a nose and a mouth, all of those things, you're not dealing with God. God is supposed to be a spirit. You're dealing with your reflection and your own ego. And not only that, you're dealing with the ego that someone else is trying to sell you because they're profiting off of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think religion is like the original tool of patriarchy and white supremacy. It's just so obvious that, and I understand that religion is harder to deconstruct for people than other things because your entire view of existence is at stake. It's very hard to contend with that. I went through a very long journey of in my 20s. So I was raised really religious, deconstructed in my late teens. By my 20s, I was a full atheist, but I didn't really care that I was an atheist. I maybe would have called myself agnostic because I just didn't care anymore about whether or not there was any truth to any religion. I just disengaged with the conversation altogether and just wasn't. I didn't find it interesting. And then I actually came back around in my early 30s to I'm now a very spiritual person. I do believe that there's more than what we know. I personally believe in reincarnation. I've read so many studies, past life studies, NDE studies, that I have been convinced. So I have come back around to believing that there is something more than just this physical existence. However, I don't, I have to be very careful with that ideology because it, it can't explain everything and it has to be used through an intersectional lens. In other words, like to the extent that something like manifesting is real, you have to say then that the people who suffered oppression have a harder time manifesting because they have been told to internalize their where they are. And so if you are not looking at all of the spiritual stuff through an intersectional lens, it becomes white supremacy. Spirituality becomes white supremacy because it looks like, well, all the people being rewarded are white people, so they must be the most spiritual, right? Like that's what it looks like
Right.
if you don't take an intersectional lens to your spiritual tradition. So I hold it very lightly, my spiritual beliefs. I don't cling to it. If I find out that I'm like wrong about something or that I misunderstand something, I like to be open to revising it. But I have been sufficiently convinced now that there is something more than materialism. I don't think our body's going to a ground. Yeah, and that's it.
No, I love that. I think that it's as far as your individual relationship with spirit is very different than a religious institution,
Yeah.
right? When you institutionalize an individual
Yeah.
belief, it does something to that individual journey. You know what I mean? Because now your individual, what spirit has for you, you know what I mean, what God has for you now has to conform to this very regimented, pre-established path that if you go to the left or the right from, there's these dire consequences. I feel like there when I started, I was very much clinging to um, Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? Because of the trauma I had experienced as a young man and what I felt guilty about, what I felt was my fault. I was able to now give that over to this religion, and that felt good to be able to do that, to have a fresh start. And I think a lot of people want a fresh start, but when your fresh start becomes now a process of condemning other people, you know what I mean? And I was talking to my wife about this earlier today. A lot of people both religion and spirituality is a way for them to feel better about themselves and other people. I'm now high, I'm up here and you're down
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
because of my spirituality and what I know and what you don't know and what I've experienced and what Spirit told me. I used to always have some people say, "Oh, God told me to tell you. God told me to tell you, blase
Hate that
blase.
shit.
God told me to tell you, blase blase." And I'm like, well, I believe in God. If God has something to tell me, then God should tell me. Why
Yep.
does God need to use you to tell me something? If
Right.
God is God, so it can be very. But and then people use that to add weight to what they're saying instead of just saying, "Hey, you know what? In my opinion, I think you should do this." They'll say, "Well, God told me to tell you this," right?
Yeah, it's so toxic. It's because you're presuming that you have a closer avenue with God than I do. That's the presumption, right? This that like you have a
Yeah.
channel, I don't, right? I kind of conceive of it now instead of God. God is actually a triggering word for me now because of my childhood, and there was a lot of religious trauma of my childhood. Just like the idea that this I allegedly loving God wiped all of humanity out, every plant, every animal, every baby in a flood just because he didn't like them. Like he made them in his image and then he mass murdered like he committed the original genocide, right? Um and like I remember thinking like he killed like every baby lamb, every toddler, every newborn baby, every pregnant woman, and they're
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, he is great and holy." And I was like, "Wait, wait, wait." Like, I don't know, he mass murdered everybody and he's good? Then what's bad? If you can mass murder the entirety of creation and that's good, then what is even bad? So I had a lot of trauma around that. I also had trauma around hell. Like when I was like 5, I used to lay awake at night for literal hours worrying about going to hell. Hours of my life worrying about going to hell, worrying about other people going to hell. I spent so I it was trauma. It was trauma. So for now when I engage with religion, it's very hard. Like I still to this day get triggered when people talk about God because that's the God they usually mean is that God that like gave me all that trauma. And so like I like to conceive of it more as in like our collective consciousness or our higher selves, our future selves. I think all time exists at once and there's a version of us that's sending wisdom back to us. I like to send wisdom back to my younger self and I hope they receive it. Um, so I conceive of it like that now. That's the only way I can safely interact with an idea of a power that's like not that's outside of myself somewhat. Like otherwise to me, yeah, it's a really traumatic. It's traumatic.
Quick question: how are you on time?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay,
Yeah.
because I got other questions, but I always want to be
Yeah, yeah,
mindful
yeah.
of the time. So, okay. So, what about as far as the institution of business? Like, how is economy, things of that nature being still leveraged to marginalize women and reinforce male dominance?
Um, a few different ways. The single greatest predictor at success under capitalism is that your parents had success under capitalism. Um, the single greatest predictor of whether you're going to do very well is like that you have access to capital, really. And I'm an attorney that represents startups and small businesses, and like I can tell you that like it is far easier for men to raise money than it is for women to raise money, even when they have very good ideas. Most of the clients I represent that are women-owned businesses, they grow organically, right? Like they grow like step by step, whereas the men take these big swings and they go do fundraising so they can get that bigger leap. But like it comes down to this. We've done studies that show that people tend to invest in and mentor people that remind them of themselves. That's just human nature, is
Mhm.
normal. It's not like, but when all of the people in power are mostly cishet white men, then then when those are the people that have power to dole out, that's who they're going to dole it out to. So, like, there are a couple studies. There's a study of college professors where they had students write bids for mentorship and help with work. And when the emails came from a white male sounding name, the professors of these like liberal academic, they were like, "Yes, I'll mentor you. Come by my office. How can I help? I'll introduce you to so and so. I'll make connection. I'll do whatever." Right? But when it was a woman or a person of color, no, they would be very curt. Here, go look at chapter 3, right? Like very
Yeah.
so like this is our liberal academia where these professors were far more likely to invest mentorship and energy in people that reminded them of themselves. And the same thing happens with resumes. When you do resume tests, you send out identical resumes, some by men, some by women. And I think it's like 80, 90% they call the man with an identical resume, not the woman, right? And I've known people that use initials on their resumes for this very reason, so that you can't tell, you know? So it's just by definition, if it's all cishet white men making the hiring decisions and the mentoring decisions and the decisions for the future of business, they are going to be picking people that will remind them of themselves. And that's like one of our very biggest hurdles. That and like, there's still so much misogyny, you know, like in the law, they keep asking like, how come women don't end up partners in law firms? Why aren't women applying for judgeships at the rate? So women graduate from law school at a higher rate than men. And we end up, but far fewer of us end up being partners at law firms, and far fewer of us end up being judges, and far fewer of us end up staying in litigation. And I was a litigator which is like a trial attorney. I was very good at it, but like the misogyny wore me down until I had to quit. The number of times that I got called darling, honey, little girl, I got offered hugs in exchange for an extension on Discovery. The number of names that I got called, the fake dates people brought me on. Oh, I have a case I need you to look at. Let's go to dinner. And then I'd get there and it'd be a surprise date. Like it wore me down. It beat me. Honestly, like the reason I own my own law practice now is because, you know, I worked at a firm where all of the men at the same level made $5,000 more than the women. Then I worked at another firm where my boss was like literally stalking me on the weekends. And then I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I had to like I was very good at litigation. Like you should see me give an opening or a closing statement. You should see me cross-examine somebody. I can cross-examine anyone. Like I am so naturally good at that. And yet I don't do it very much anymore because I can't. It drove me insane how misogynistic the world was. I literally, in front of a female judge, had a man that I was cross-examining stand up and scream, "Who the fuck do you think you are, you stupid little girl?" Wow. He goes, "Who are you to ask me questions?" You know? In front of a female judge. I mean, I obviously won that case, but her face, she had the best poker face. She didn't even react. But like, I mean, it was they wore me down. And now I'm not a litigator anymore. They won. Can't do it. I won't subject myself to that. And I think that's the case in a lot of really competitive industries. The misogyny is just running rampant. And so I had this judge on a case earlier this year, or last December, or wrapped up last December. And the other party didn't have an attorney. He was representing himself. And he was just an abusive misogynist. Honestly, one of the worst men I've ever come across in my practice ever. Like, I couldn't get 3 words in, he would interrupt me. And then if I said, every time I said, "I'm not finished speaking yet," he would say, "Everybody hates you. You're so offensive." Like he would scream. Anyway, it was terrible. So that guy I just wrote off, right? I was like, whatever. He's just kind of an idiot and he's a misogynist and he's wrong in this case and he knows it, whatever. Kind of wrote him off. But then the judge, in front of the judge, he cut me off, called me names, like in a professional setting, in a hearing, called me all these petty names. And do you know what the old white male judge said? "Hey, everybody, let's all calm down now." Wow. As if we were all responsible for this conflict that was happening. When what he should have said is, she had the floor, she was speaking, stop interrupting her, and do not speak to her that way. Like, this is a professional setting. We do not call people names. That's what the judge should have said. So right. That's not what he said. So what I did is I made a TikTok about it, and then I filed a complaint with, because he was a private judge, it was an arbitration. So I filed a complaint, and the like owner of the arbitration place called me and was like, "Should I fire him?" And I basically was like, yes. I was like, he's also not very smart. Like he should have retired a long time. Like he's well past his prime. He couldn't really follow the case, but like also like he like men like that, he thinks he's well-meaning. But this is the vast majority of men in law. Is a vast majority of them are like him, where everybody just calm down instead of calling out the abusive behavior and holding them accountable, right? Mm-hmm. So like, you know, this is how capitalism and patriarchy are like teammates, right? Like they really work to uphold the current power structures and to keep current people in power. Like there's just not an avenue. I am as ambitious, intelligent, like I love my work, and yet I quit. I quit that part of the law. Now I do other things, but I quit because I was like, I'm not going to spend a lifetime being abused. I will not walk into one more courtroom and be abused by a man. Sorry if that means you lose somebody who is very skilled at this job. You know, you can have your boring men arguing with each other, as far as I'm concerned. You know,
Yeah.
so and I think it's prevalent in all of business. I think this is just how. I mean, I think it's worse in the law and in medicine. I think it's pretty bad in medicine as well. But
Yeah, my daughter is in her undergrad wants to go into law, so I'm like I'm taking notes, and I don't like
I mean,
that.
it's heading in the right direction, but very slowly. It's very
Yeah.
slowly. You know, it's not fast at all. Like, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years now, and like, it's barely moved. The needle has barely moved.
Okay. Education.
There is a study in elementary school where people watched the way that teachers reacted to male and female students. And when little boys got an answer wrong, the teacher would say, "Well, yes, and she would provide the correction, or he would provide the correction. When a girl got an answer wrong, they would say, "Incorrect. Here's the right answer." And they noticed
Wow.
this across the board. So the coddling of boys in education starts immediately. The idea that boys can't handle critical feedback, which sells boys short, because of course they can. But if they start getting coddled from that age forward, you can only imagine who they become by the time they're in college. They are constant, you combine that with the study showing professors are more likely to mentor them. You combine that with the fact that they perceive women are talking in class a lot more than they are. You combine that with the studies about how frequently boys in school interrupt girls in school. Yeah, education, every system that exists within patriarchy and white supremacy is going to reflect those systems. Period. This is why when we're like burn it all down, we don't mean like literally stop everything at once. We mean we have to rethink everything from the ground up because everything is tainted.
Right.
Everything is tainted.
And compounded with the fact that our education system, at least as far as K through 12, was designed to create obedient factory workers. It wasn't. It was never created to create independent thinkers who can solve problems and can reimagine a new world. No, it's like no, do what you're told.
Yep. It is like our whole educate there, and we knew that. They did that intentionally. They said the quiet part out loud. They said we're trying to create obedient factory workers. Like they're not trying to create good citizens or happy people. No, obedience. Obedience. So what is obedience? It's not challenging current systems. The
Yeah.
fundamental aspect of obedience is that you fall in line. So that's not an accident.
Right. Absolutely. We talked about family, so I'm not gonna go back into that. But as far as like the arts and entertainment world, like when you're watching media, like what are some of the things you're still seeing as far as patriarchal values being communicated to both men and women?
Entertainment media has taken a very encouraging turn in the past 10 years that I thought like was so long overdue. So when I was growing up, all of the stories that I saw were stories of like white men doing things, right? Like almost every movie, book, TV show centered a white man doing something and then women supporting him. If the woman got to be the main character, then her arc was always falling in love. So women fell in love first and foremost, and then maybe did some things on the side. Men got to have these beautiful like heroes journeys, and then maybe fell in love on the side. And so that was like the entirety of the media that I grew up with. It was just white men doing things like that, like all of the media for the first
Yeah.
25 years of my life, 30 years of my life was white men doing things. And then something started to happen. Now, media is still very largely written and directed and produced by white men, so there's still so much bias in it. However, like they started giving the microphone to other people, and we started to see more interesting stories about women where they got to be the main character, they get to do interesting things, they got to be flawed. Like before, all women in media were the Madonna or the whore, right? Binary. There's nothing in between. She was either like a terrible, manipulative, horrible woman, or she was so innocent and perfect and always perfectly intentioned. Even if she oopsie made a mistake, she was so perfectly intentioned. To this day, whenever I see a female character written like that, I get ragey. Like, you'll still come across them. There will still be women characters where they literally don't do anything wrong ever. And I just get so ragey. I'm like, you don't even let us be human, right? Oh yeah, somebody just commented the Bechdel test too. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Bechdel test, like, it's absurd actually that there's any media that would fail the Bechdel test, and yet so much like really good, renowned media fails it, right? So, like, it has taken a change. It's turned for the better. Like, we started having queer characters centered and not in tropey ways. Finally, like, queer people were just a trope for 20 years, and now they
Right.
get to like be human beings. And not again, not in all media, but in some. And so I think we're at a rather exciting place now. I still think the majority of media, it's old white men, old white wealthy men deciding what media gets made, and I think that's why we get a lot of violence. Like, I made a TikTok saying, like, I absolutely hate watching violence. Like, I can't. I cover my eyes, and I sometimes have to plug my ears. Like, it viscerally makes me feel very negatively violence. And I made a TikTok thinking that I was unusual in this because I was like, I guess I've just never been desensitized, but I hate watching violence. And all these women in my comments were like, no, I hate it too. I have to plug my ears. I have to leave the room. I pick up my phone and disengage whenever I see violence. And I'm like, wait a minute. Is all the violence just for men? And I think it is. And I don't know why men enjoy it. I don't understand how you enjoy it. I don't understand the enjoyment of violence as entertainment. I don't understand it. I probably never will. There's no part of me. This is why patriarchy, like, there's no part of me that could ever be entertained by any violence whatsoever. It is antithetical to the core. I cannot watch an animal or a person suffer and call that an enjoyable process. I read all of the Game of Thrones books like long before they were made into a show, and then when those misogynistic showrunners made that like seventh season, like, you know how many grapes they added in that weren't in the stories? They weren't needed
Oh,
for the
wow.
plot. They weren't needed for character development because those characters were the best developed. That man writes women better than almost anybody, right? And yet these guys thought, you know what this needs? More graping, because it's entertaining. Because men like watching women graped. It's clearly not necessary for the plot because it wasn't in the books,
Wow.
and it enrages me. Like, makes me, I want to scream. I want to be like, who do you think you are that you get pleasure from watching that? Like, you need therapy. Every one of you needs therapy, you
Yeah.
know?
This
But
is
I
true.
really just don't understand it. I don't understand. I will never understand violence as entertainment.
Yeah. It affirms again. We talked about masculinity and masculinity being defined by being able to go to war. Being able to be a soldier, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's how your masculinity is defined. But you don't get the chance to express it when you go to
Right.
watch an action movie. Now you can live vicariously through
Yeah.
this character who's way better at it than you would ever be. Right?
Right.
He's John Wick. He's unaliving everybody. Everything's a
Right.
perfect headshot.
Right.
200 people unalive by the end of the movie, and you feel like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Yeah, totally.
That's probably what it is. It's probably we've taught men they have value in violence, and men don't generally get to express that, and so they probably project themselves on these main characters who get to do that, and it probably, I don't know. I'll never understand it. I'll never understand it.
It's crazy because the especially in the 80s, oh my gosh, it was predictable, like clockwork. It would always be the black character that would die, or rather be unalived before the end of the movie as a sacrificial lamb.
Yep.
Throughout that movie, and yet we still go to those movies and even find ways to enjoy it. But when the role is reversed, men can't go to see a movie that centers women, that affirms, what her narrative is, and can't go on that same imaginative trip, even though you're not centered in the story. I wasn't centered in any Arnold Schwarzenegger movies or Rambo
Right.
or anything of that nature, but I still enjoyed it because it's like, that's a movie, you know what I mean? But now there's a different story where there's a different hero, but you can't connect with it. I'm a Marvel fan, and I love seeing all my comic book characters come to life, and it was amazing to me how much flack like Captain Marvel got, and I was like, Captain Marvel is literally Superman. She is the Marvel version, the female version of Superman. And when you watch Superman, Superman is not a charismatic character at all.
No.
He's as straight could be. All the other characters make Superman interesting. So, but when it's a female role, it's like, oh my gosh, she's so dispassionate. She's so no, she's Superman. She is literally the Marvel version of Superman. She's not supposed to be.
Right.
You're just not used to see
it's the idea that like the male experience is universal. It's for everybody, but the female experience is for women.
Right.
Right. It's the same thing with like women can't be funny. You know, it's the same thing. Like men are not willing to engage with stories that don't center them. Like it shocks me how like all the men that I have dated have, like I said, have been like leftist, liberal, feminist, quote unquote. But like, yeah, they wouldn't watch very many women-led movies. They didn't listen to women artists like music. They didn't. They considered that for women. And I'm like, now that's a red flag for me. If I meet somebody and their thing is art or music or books or TV or film, whatever their thing is, and I ask their top 5, and they're all male-led, that's it. If you can engage with an art and love it so much that you call it your favorite, but 100% of your favorites are through the lens of maleness, sorry, bud. No thanks, pass. Not interested, you know? Because like you're not even engaging with the stories that other people live.
Right.
You don't consider them relevant or artistic or valuable, you know?
And that's part of what makes art interesting. That's part of what makes reading interesting is you can go to a different place. You can live a different life. You know what I mean? I don't know why you would want to live the same life over and over again, even in your imagination.
I use like historical fiction to learn about other cultures because I don't love nonfiction very much, but like I will read historical fiction about like 1900s Korea. And that is how I learned about the struggle of Korean people and like understand that they were basically treated the way we treat Black people. And like I learned it through fiction. I learned it through the stories of fiction. The book Americana, like talks, you know, is the story about a woman who immigrates from Africa to the U.S. and so she's not African American, and she's straddling the community of like, well, I'm not quite African American because I didn't grow up with Blackness as an identity because where I come from, everybody's Black, so Blackness isn't my identity. But now I'm like discriminated with against the same way that they are, and like engaging with that perspective on Blackness from somebody who wasn't raised here was so like it altered so many of my understandings of both African American culture and African culture. And like, you know, so yeah, fiction to me, like this is where I grow myself and I grow my empathy circle. It's fiction. Like it's reading or films or music, right? So like I intentionally expose myself constantly to people who living lives that I don't get to live in this life. You know, I just read a book called Detransition Baby about like a trans woman trying to have a baby. And my God, I would have never understood that experience. I would have never understood that experience had it not been for a book of fiction. You know? So like when you're engaging with art and you're only engaging with the art of people that look and think and act and like are just like you, like it's so uninteresting. It's so uninteresting. How do you become empathetic to other people?
You don't. And I don't think men value. I don't think men. A lot of men. Let me not say. I'm never. First of all, let me step back for a minute. Never saying all men. You know what I mean? I don't think that needs to be said, but unfortunately it does. You know what I mean? When I say men, I'm talking about to whom it may apply to whom it may concern.
Right.
But I don't think men value empathy or look at empathy as a strength.
Yeah.
As opposed to it being some, weakness. Being able to experience, the world through someone else's eyes or imagine that, is a strength. It's a way to think creatively. You know what I mean? If you're trying to do anything in business and you're designing a product, you're not designing that product for just you. Your empathy allows you to see, okay, how is this person going to view this? How is this person going to experience this? And you do that by asking questions, by being curious. But a lot of times we shut that curiosity down because we feel like we have to be this stoic soldier. It's not helpful.
Yeah.
What about news media?
I mean, news media is like what I have learned. I've had in my own little, I've been radicalized against mainstream media in the past 6 months in the way that so many people have, because I knew that it was problematic. Like when the New York Times ran opinion pieces in support of the war in Iraq 20 years ago, I was very against it. I was very vocal. And I kind of started questioning mainstream media back then, and I've been on a journey of questioning it. But I can't say the words, obviously, but you know what's going on over there. The way that the media has covered it, it's like a funhouse mirror. It's not even like the degree to which they are committed to maintaining the narrative of the current power structures, all of them: colonialism, imperialism, white supremacy, patriarchy, like all of them. Like their commitment to those narratives so far supersedes any commitment to truth,
Right.
any commitment to their own integrity, any commitment to reality. That like now at this point, like this is the death throw, I think, of legacy media. I think it's done. I think the future of media are going to be creators. And that has its own set of problems. Don't get me wrong. That is not a solution. It's going to have its own problems. Lack of fact checking, lack of resources when somebody gets sued by, you know, the big entities they're reporting against. Like there are going to be problems with this as the new media. However, the old media has committed, I mean, it has unalived itself as far as I'm concerned in the past 6 months. It's
Yeah.
dead. It's dead. Like they're liars. Like the headlines. Palestinians get killed. And then, you know, somebody's doing the killing. Palestinians doing the killing. Like, you know, just the way that they write it. Like aid workers get killed instead of somebody killed the aid workers.
Right.
Like, it's just every article that I read is so biased. Even when they're reporting true facts, the way that they report them makes me want to gag, makes me want to throw up. Like, it's so terrible.
Yeah.
And then, like, I think we're all realizing this right now. I think this is this stage of radicalization is that we're like, we can't trust any institution. Like all the ones we've just gone through: business, education, and media. Like we can't trust any of them. What happens when you take a society and in a very brief period of less than a year, you take away every piece of credible authority that they've ever had? Everyone that they've trusted, whether it's their politicians, almost all of whom started out on the wrong side of this and only a few have ended up on the right side. Every celebrity, like the vast majority of them have handled this terribly. Every mainstream media, like literally every institution we held with high regard for leadership or held with any regard are gone. What does that leave us with? That's the moment we're in right now. It's
Yep.
very destabilizing. You can't look up anymore. There's no up. There is no leadership. All of it is a fallacy. And what happens when that happens? We can go a couple different ways. You can descend into fascism because you're so desperate for big strong daddy that you'll take anybody that will give you the big strong daddy vibes. I got this. I'll control everything. Don't you worry. Or what I advocate for is a return to our own internal authority. People need to start trusting their own wisdom. People need to start trusting their own discernment. They need to develop discernment. They need to realize that they are just as capable of determining right from wrong as the leadership that they've been following their whole lives. They've always looked to these people to tell us what's really right or wrong. Look to Bernie Sanders. That guy knows, right? And he got it wrong. Like, we have to, this is the great moment where we need to be returning to ourselves, to our own authority. And it's happening so fast and so dramatically that like some people are going to go the other way and they're going to turn towards fascism. It's the two roads. Trust myself, need a big daddy.
When Fox News was sued, and they, for basically false reporting, and they were able to get out of that lawsuit because we're not reporting the news. We're entertainment. If that didn't give you a clear sign that, oh, maybe I'm watching the wrong news source, but it's not just Fox News. It's just the most clear example of it. You know what I mean?
They're a
But
caricature
when
of
you're looking
us.
at that at mainstream media, ask where's the dehumanization? Who's being dehumanized in the story?
Yeah.
And it becomes so glaringly when we look at the Palestinian people. It's like, wow, how far are we going to take it? How far are we going to say this isn't happening? How far are we going to say this isn't what it obviously is? You know what I mean? It's like, oh no, we're not. We're just relocating people. We're just moving them. You know what I mean? Now whether they're alive or not when we move them, that's just a different story. You know, it it borders on like parody. You know, borders
It
on almost
does.
like yeah,
It's starting to look, it's making itself so obvious that that's why it's waking so many people up at the same time. This is the great awakening. This
yeah.
this is it. This is the moment when the revolution goes full speed ahead. And it's an inside out revolution. It's a revolution of ideas. It's a revolution where we each deconstruct and stop subscribing to all current power systems. And every time we do that and we make one choice one day, we deal a blow. So, like, if I decide not to buy that $300 cream to make my eyes look like I didn't age, that decision not to buy that is a blow to both patriarchy and capitalism. If you decide tomorrow that, creating content and reaching people brings you more joy and meaning than buying that new car, and you make that choice, blow to capitalism. Like, if you decide your worth isn't your production and you decide not to slave away for bosses that will never care about you and instead you invest back in yourself, that's a blow to capitalism. So as we each deconstruct from these power systems, we will organically start making life decisions that weaken those systems. And that is what we are seeing now. It started a few years ago, but the degree to which it has picked up pace and it accelerated since October, it almost leaves my head spinning, and I was ready for it. I was ready for it. I was ready to be part of the conversation leading it. I have a very strong sense of self and a strong sense of my own authority. So if anybody was ready, it would be me. And I still find it destabilizing. I still find it a little bit like I'm in an earthquake because every single institution around me is corrupt as fuck. you know? And for evidence of that, you need look no further than the fact they're trying to ban this app because this is the one app capable of doing this right now.
Right.
And like obviously all of us know that that's the reason they're trying to ban it. And like I just imagine like if I'm getting destabilized in this process, probably the average person who is just now starting the deconstruction process and hasn't been doing it for a decade or two, like this must be a lot. This must be a lot, you know?
Yeah.
This is why I try to have compassion with people, but until they harm other people. But
Absolutely leads us to the government, you know what I mean, as far as how patriarchy is still leveraged there. And I think you called it out as far as the blind loyalty to just untruth. You know, when you talk about, well, the reason why they want to, oh, we want to get rid of it for your protection. No, you don't.
yeah.
Every company, every social media company on this planet is selling our information. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You're not doing it
Yeah.
for us.
And they're manipulating elections. Like Facebook
Yeah.
gave Donald Trump the election. Like if Facebook didn't exist, he would have never been president. So yeah, obviously it's like it's complete BS that it has
Yeah.
anything to do with our safety. Like, I mean, everybody really knows that. Like, it's so weird when anyone engages in the tiring game that might be the reason. It's like everybody knows that it's not, you know. But yeah, the government, like, you know, it's obviously that like growing up, I thought it went like government, capitalism, other things. But now I'm realizing that I had that wrong, that it was always the capitalists who were in control of government and it wasn't, they were, you know, I kind of always thought they were like teammates, but
Right.
now it's like all of the politicians are just their little bitches, are just the
Your
capitalists little
employees.
bitches. Yeah. Like they're all owned. Every single one of them is just owned by their capitalist overlords. And like once you realize that, it's just like, you know, so I watched a TikTok yesterday where this guy was like, you know, everybody likes to think that like the original founding fathers were so wise, despite the fact, but they were all like 18 to 22. But like when they signed the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, they were so young. But we like to say they're like, oh, so wise because they did democracy, but they didn't do democracy. They did white male, leadership. Like they were more concerned with tyranny by majority.
Right.
Like the thing that they feared was that everybody would realize that they are taking more than their fair share of that pie, and that everybody would come and get it. So they do things like the Electoral College. They do things like giving every state, regardless of, population, 2 votes, which is obscene. When you have California with this many million people and you've got like fucking Delaware or Iowa or whatever, it's insane that they have the same senatorial power that we do. Insane, I mean, like all of these institutions were never aimed at democracy in the first place. That was a lie we've told, that they were aimed at democracy, however imperfectly. No, they were never aimed there. They were always aimed at the concentration of power in white male property owners, period. We should not be surprised that it's still aiming there. Absolutely. That's how it was built,
And I think going back to the good man, bad man thing, people want to say, well, patriarchy can't be all bad. But just like you would argue against monarchy, it didn't matter whether there was an evil king or a good king. Monarchy was still dysfunctional. You know what I mean? And to pray for a good kings were far and few between, because the system of monarchy was set up to create greedy, corrupt kings that wanted power and wanted to lord it over, expand their torture, all of those things. So when you're looking at patriarchy, there is not a good way to dominate someone else. No. There is no such thing as benevolent patriarchy.
There isn't. There is no such thing as you ruling over me in my house from my best interest, because the presumption is that I don't know what's in my own best interest, which is infantilizing. And also, I know myself better than any other person could. And like, I probably know you better than any person. You know what I mean? Like, because women have to learn men in a way that men don't have to learn women. So I knew my male partners far better than they ever knew me. My male partners were always surprised by me in the end. What is this?
Right. You got the cowboy hat on that one.
That's random. So yeah, I think, the idea of like a benevolent, it's just so gross. It's like, it's so patronizing, like, I'm not going to lie. If I were to list the 100 wisest people that I know of in the world, 80 of them would be women. 20 would be men. Truth. That's just the truth. And you're going to tell me that men should be running things, so that men should be, benevolently leading us? No. Pass. Immediate pass, Like, I don't even want to engage with the idea.
So, we've talked about intersectionality like throughout this conversation, but just to, I guess, solidify that thought, like, how do other forms of oppression like racism, classism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, how does all that help to keep patriarchy specifically in place?
Yeah, I mean, like, they all work together. They're so intertwined. You cannot end one without ending them all. Like, you have to aim at all of them, or else that one will just, it's like an octopus with all these arms that can grow it back. So if you take the octopus and you cut off patriarchy, it's going to grow the patriarchy arm back if you leave everything else intact. If you leave white supremacy and ableism and transphobia and homophobia, if you leave those intact, like, homophobia, like you've pointed out, is very often just misogyny. It's just hatred of women, and it I've heard somebody say that transphobia relates to that in the sense that, like, people are so offended of the idea that you could be born with the privilege of being a man and choose not to be a man. That's just so offensive, right? And vice versa, that you could be born without that privilege but think that you're entitled to it. It's like that crossing of that threshold, that's why some of it enrages people. Like, it's always been so strange to me since I was very young, even when I was religious, that people cared about another person's sexuality or gender expression. I will never understand why other people care about that. Like, I will never understand why you care about what you're like, who your neighbor loves. It just never made any sense to me whatsoever. It has zero effect on your life. And I think like the only way to uphold transphobia and homophobia is to tether it to patriarchy. And then to be like, well, those men, they're like women and we hate women, right? Like that's where they, because without that, how the fuck do you care what other people are doing? Get a life. This is what I want to say to everybody who's a transphobe or homophobe. Get a life. If you had a life that was interesting, you would stop caring about what other people do. That as long as what they're doing doesn't harm anybody, you would literally stop caring if you had a life worth living. Like if you had a rich life that was fulfilling and connecting, you wouldn't give a shit, Anyway.
This is just a theory. I could be completely wrong, but I feel like it's like your belief system has convinced you that it's a good thing to be miserable. And because you're committed to this misery based on what you feel your role is, whether that be, as a man or as a woman, or as white or as black or anything like that, when people go outside of those boundaries that you confine yourself to, it's an affront to you. Mm-hmm. It's discouraging, first of all. It's like, wait a minute, you're happy? You're happy with another woman? You're happy with another man? How dare you? I'm with this person. They're making me miserable. Yeah. I stuck it out.
It's wild that there's a certain sect of mothers, not a lot of them, but there's a small group of mothers that are very pissed about the child-free movement. Like, whenever a woman is pissed about the child-free movement, I know she's an unhappy mom. Because happy moms are just like, good for you, sis. If you don't want kids, then come be fun auntie. Or, do life. Like, the happy moms are the ones who are rooting for all of us. The moms who are like, stop making child-free your whole personality. Those are unhappy people. Yeah. Those are misery loves company people. It's like the same whenever I will make content about the inherent inequities in the institution of marriage, right? So I'm talking about trends based on science. I'm not talking about each individual relationship. There are exceptions, but I'm talking about trends based on data that we have. There will always be women that come in and they're like, you're wrong. Marriage is the most important thing in the entire world. It's my sole source of happiness, blah, blah, blah. And I can tell those women are not happy, right? Because if you are happy, you would be in there rooting for people who are finding their happiness on other paths. But if you think everybody has to follow your path, it's because misery loves company. It's almost always a projection without fail. One
of my most famous trolling experiences on my site was when I made a series about marriage, and I was talking about some of the same things you're talking about as far as how marriage is inherently, tied to slavery, when it comes to women. That's the history it comes out of. Oh my gosh, this woman who was, I guess, newly married, according to her, she trolled me for weeks. Hundreds and hundreds of comments. Everybody could get it because she was defending her marriage. Yeah. And, marriage is good. And I was like, I'm not attacking your marriage. I'm just talking about in general, if you were able to take something that was designed to subjugate you and turn it into something beautiful, that just is a testament to your own personal creativity. And, but that doesn't mean that the institution itself was not set up in that way to do that thing.
Yeah, there are exceptions to absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So just because an institution is oppressive doesn't mean every single person experiencing the institution experiences it in the same way. It doesn't. There are people that are exceptions, but also there are people that just don't realize that they're not exceptions, right? There are a lot of women who are like, no, I have a good egalitarian marriage. And then when they leave it, they're like, no, it wasn't egalitarian. I just didn't see it. I just didn't see all of the micro ways that I gave and he took. They don't see it till they leave, But there are absolutely some happy marriages for sure. To be honest, I haven't seen one in real life, like a long-term happy marriage. I've seen people be happy for the first 10 years. I've never personally witnessed a thriving marriage past the 10-year mark ever in my life. So that is I admit that that's a blind spot that I have, and that definitely informs a lot of my opinions, is what I see past the 10-year mark is a lot of codependence. People afraid to be alone because in this society, you're seen as more valued when you're partnered, and you're seen as there's something wrong with you when you're single. And I think a lot of people do stay in relationships that they're unhappy with for that, because they don't want the social stigma. I know I stayed a little longer in my last relationship because of that. I was afraid of the stigma. Like I had achieved the thing and now I'm unachieving it, you know? Um, that being said, I'm certain that there are happy, thriving marriages. I see them on TikTok. But I never believe, I don't disbelieve them, but I also don't put too much stock in them because you only see what people show you, right? But I am sure that there are marriages out there that are happy and that lift both people up. I'm certain of it. Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg is like the one I always fall back on. She would
Yeah.
not have been who she was had she not had that husband, right? So there have to be marriages like that. However, they're definitely the exception, not the rule. And like when we're talking about the rule, I don't need everybody's exception to it. If you could share your exception to the rule, if it adds value to the conversation and provides useful information that people can act upon. But when people come in and just gloat or say that it's wrong, that the rule is wrong, that's when I'm like, you're just projecting at that point.
No, absolutely. I've been married for 15 years, and like we were effectively divorced. We were still working out the legality of it, but and because I was so invested in patriarchy, I was so invested in Christianity, and my the way I had ordered my life, it was like, well, God's here. What I mean? There's God, and then there's making sure that being a husband. And then there's the wife, and then there's the children. And I was so invested in that strict hierarchy that I couldn't see that I was never getting down. First of all, you never get down to wife. If you think in that hierarchy. Second of all, if you're talking about God and she's part of the kingdom of God, she's a believer as well. She's part of the kingdom of God that you should be taken care of. But it wasn't until I started deconstructing Christianity and dismantling patriarchy for myself that I was able to become a decent mate, and become a person that was fun to be around again. Because I was completely like not a fun person to deal with. I mean, if you're thinking all the time about hell and eternal damnation, like that's all you think about. How can I turn this conversation about hockey into a conversation about eternal damnation so I can share the gospel? If that's how if you're thinking about on Saturdays, about going to funerals so you can share that is, you're not a fun person to be around. But
No.
this is the best year of marriage we've had. You know what I mean? Because now we can relate. I can relate to her and say I can share my thoughts and feelings and not be because I felt like I think a lot of men internalize that in order to be a man, in order to be a protector, I can't show vulnerability to my mate. What I mean? If I do that, she's not going to respect, either she's not going to respect me as a man, or she's not going to understand it, or it's going to throw the power balance off. Something's going to go wrong if I'm vulnerable. But that's what your mate is for.
Yes.
Why would you have a mate at all if you cannot be vulnerable? If you don't trust them, don't be with them.
I always say I have never fallen in love with a man until I've seen him cry. It's not even possible. I can't unless I fall in love with men for their vulnerability and their capacity for emotional connection. So if they can't cry, I can't love them. Like it's like physically impossible for me. Like I have always dated men who were very like all of the men that I've fallen in love with were the kind of guys who like at a touching movie would cry. They were all men that when I did something like really special for their birthdays, they would cry out of joy, Like like for me, there's no other point. I have no interest in being in a relationship with somebody that I can't connect on an emotional level with. So I tend to, and I am not as outwardly as emotional. I don't cry as easily. I cry. The older I get, the more easily I cry. Childhood indoctrination shit that I'm unpacking, right? But like generally speaking, like I've always had partners that were had more displays of emotion than I did, and I find them more attractive. I find emotional men so inherently attractive. However, with one little asterisk, because men will say that's not true. In my experience, women are turned off by emotion, and this is what I think men don't understand. There is emotional intelligence, and then there is like emotionally centering yourself. So what I think a lot of men are talking about when they say that their emotional vulnerability gets them negative feedback, what they're talking about usually is that when a woman brings to them some pain she's experiencing, hey, you let me down, you hurt me, you did something, whatever, and he immediately centers himself. oh, it hurts me so much to hear that I did that thing. And they cry, right? Like I have been with those men too, who like any complaint you had immediately became about them and how bad they were. I'm just a bad partner. Poor me. That's not emotional intelligence. That is emotional manipulation. So when you display emotion in that context, if the only time you're displaying emotion is in the context of her coming to you with an emotional need, and then you're using emotion to center your needs over hers, that is why we don't like emotional men. Because you're being emotionally manipulative, not emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence says, oh wow, she's having feelings. And those feelings are giving me feelings, but I can hold space for her feelings first. I can hold space for her feelings without centering mine. That is emotional intelligence in a nutshell. And then, so like, I don't know any woman alive who would not be attracted to that kind of emotional intelligence. So when men say to me, every time I'm emotional, women don't like it, I know what kind of emotional they're being. Because
Right.
I'm sorry, women like it. Who doesn't want a man they can connect with emotionally? Like we all want a man we can connect with emotionally. I like soft men. Like I don't like men who have any bravado whatsoever, because by the way, bravado is just insecurity. It is just covering for insecurity. And an insecure man is never going to thrive in a relationship with me because I am very confident. It won't work. It won't work. It will implode very quickly. So I need to be with very confident men. And confident men are not macho, because macho is fake. And so, yeah, like women, we want men to have the traits that are deemed more feminine. Be soft. Be vulnerable. You know, my ex, one of my favorite things about him is that when his kids were having an emotion, he would just hold space for them. And he never tried to influence them. He would just ask them questions. He would offer his support. He would ask them what they needed. But he never tried to influence who they became or the direction in which they processed their pain. He never tried to have any control over it. He never told them they were wrong. He just held space for whatever they were experiencing. And I swear to God, I stayed with him probably longer than I should have just because I loved that aspect of him so much. I was like, that to me signaled such potential for closeness with us in the future. Like he had the potential right there, even if he didn't enact that as much with me as he did with his kids, you know? So we like emotional men. Like you're supposed to be what's the point of an intimate relationship?
Right.
Women don't want roommates. If we wanted roommates, we'd have women roommates because they're way better roommates. They really are. Women are cleaner and they're organized and they do their fair share. Like if all we wanted was a roommate, we live with our friends. If we're living with a man, it's because we want a lover and we want somebody that can be emotionally vulnerable with us.
Stuff. I love this, man. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
I love these conversations.
so, for someone who's just starting on their journey, like dismantling their own patriarchal thinking, like what's a good place to start?
Men or women?
Let's do women first,
Okay.
and then we can do men.
I want women, what I wish for women is that they stop internalizing. I think if women each sat down and listed like the 5 worst things about themselves, they are probably all untrue. They are probably all just them internalizing an aspect of patriarchy. Whatever those things are. I'm too selfish. You probably aren't selfish enough. You probably over prioritize other people. I am passive aggressive. Okay, that may be true and that is problematic. But like, let's look at how you got passive aggressive. It's because every time you were direct, women who were direct face such enormous repercussions for being direct. And so we learned to be passive aggressive as a protection mechanism. And it's not to say that I think women should continue being passive aggressive. They should still look at that. But I'm just saying I wish women would look at the things that they think are wrong with them and understand how the patriarchy put them there, probably. And then if they could free themselves from those stories of their own lack of enoughness, they can step into their own power and authority and self-trust. I want women to trust themselves. If your relationship doesn't feel good, you don't need to analyze it like from a third party, objective, logical perspective. Like if you know, you know? And I want women to return to self-trust, but they can only do that by disregarding the stories of their not enoughness that were put there intentionally by patriarchy. So that is what I would want women to do.
So what about men?
It really depends on where they are on their journey, because men have a harder journey in deconstructing from patriarchy. Like women, when they deconstruct from patriarchy, they get a better story to live into
Yeah.
of
This
their
would
own
be
worth.
men way at the beginning of their journey, just starting out. They
Okay.
just realized maybe just on this conversation, like, oh shoot, patriarchy is bad. What do I do now?
Well, if they're at the very beginning, I would like tell them to start gently, because I don't want them to have a backlash. I don't want their ego to get so provoked that they shut down the inquiry. If they're at the very beginning, I would say start consuming art by women, start following women. And just when you consume art by women and when you watch women who creators on here, do not engage that content on a basis of, is this right or wrong? Never ask that question of yourself. Instead, ask, is there anything I can learn here? Don't make anything right or wrong. That's what I mean. Like, hold space with a question mark. Commit to being okay not knowing for sure for a while, and be gentle with yourself. If you go too fast, you're at some point going to have your ego triggered, and you're going to be like, fuck this. I'm not like a worthless man. I'm not a worthless man. And you're going to like shut down, right? Like, which isn't to say that I want to coddle men. I am not going to be a part of that process for men, because it is not my responsibility anymore. I spent so much of my life doing it. But like, I think men can coddle each other, and therapists can coddle the men. But I do think at the very beginning, it needs to be soft steps. Otherwise, they're going to get ragey and shut down. For men that are further along in their journey, I think that's where the real work begins. Once you've gotten past the point where your ego is going to shut down the journey, you're safely on the other side of that. Then you have to like really start engaging with the myriad ways you harm women, and like every man does. Like whether it's like, laughing at the wrong jokes, not standing up for people, not intervening when you see a man harassing a woman in public, but mostly it's within your own home. The sweet spot is in your own home with women. That's where the vast majority of change that's going to be required of men is going to be in their romantic relationships with women, and in their caretaking, like the kin keeping, how women are always the people taking care of their siblings and their parents and their grandparents, and men aren't doing that. Like that, men need to step up in that regard as well. And that's the hard part, because that actually requires a lot of them. A lot. It requires a lot more work than they've ever had to do before. But it's necessary if they really mean it, that women should be able to be these free, liberated, self-actualized people. The only way to do that is either to say, I should not date women, or if I'm going to date them, I will do my fair share and I will not take from her. I will not take more than I give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about there's like 4 different steps to mastery. You know what I mean? And how like when you're first trying to learn a new skill, you always have to consciously think about it, like all the time. You know what I mean? Like if you had to relearn how to breathe, you know what I mean? It would be inhale, exhale, moment to moment, inhale, exhale. And it would take a lot of your energy just to breathe, because you're always thinking about it. And I think for men, a lot of doing that work is going to be like relearning how to breathe. You know?
Yeah. Sorry, I have to take my dog out real quick. Come here. Come on.
They're perfectly fine.
He's like, I
Let's
have to pee.
Let's get the likes up, y'all. If we could get over to 50,000, I'd be real grateful. If you all have any questions, go ahead and
You know, when it, go potty. Go
you
potty.
think other women like discernment. Just looking at some questions real quick.
Yeah, let's answer some crowd questions.
Yeah, see what we got here. Sarah says, in my experience, it's very been manipulated into thinking a man is sensitive when they are not.
We have a request for the dog. Hold on.
Yeah, no problems.
Do you see him? There he is. That's Mouse. Hi, Mouse.
Robbie Jig says, making me real. Aw,
Hi, baby. This is him. Yeah.
baby.
Yeah, he's so cute.
That's good stuff. Oh. Well, I guess last question, because I want to thank you so much for
Yeah.
um, staying with me, going almost another hour, in discussion. I try to keep this to 1 to 2 hours, but this has been an excellent discussion.
Yeah.
What does a world without patriarchy look like for women and for men?
Better for everybody. It's a world in which we tackle climate change. It's a solar punk future where we take the best of what technology has to offer and we use it to decentralize power and access to resources. It is, we use AI to make people work less, not more. We use it not to enrich the wealthiest, but we end wealth disparity because what's even the point of that? Like humans are inventive, creative creatures. You do not need the incentive of being a billionaire in order to create things. People would create things anyway because we are creative beings. The lie that we need, you have to have the possibility of being a billionaire or nobody would do anything is bullshit. We would create art because we are creative beings. And I think in the future, I see that we spend a few hours a day working. Nobody's filthy rich, but nobody is poor. We don't leave anybody behind. We have true disability justice. We we recognize the wealth of the earth that we live on, and we decentralize access to all of its gifts so that everybody can get it. There is more than enough to go around for every single living being, and it's just a matter of taking it out of the hands of these people who are literally hoarders and distributing it to everybody. And I think that the only path to that future is we have to dismantle all of it. Patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, all of them are built on such a lie. Such a lie. And the truth really, I know this is so cliche, but the truth really does set you free. When you aim your North Star at what is true, good things will happen. Good things will happen. It will, like, God, if we could turn over leadership of the world tomorrow to women, I guarantee you we would reverse climate change in the next 100 years. Guaranteed. Without 100%. There would be no more wars. There would be no more wars. But you'd have to give it to all women at the same time because the problem is there's a lot of data showing that, like, if you take 10 men and you put one woman in, she has to act even more like a man to be taken seriously. So she doubles down. Just like if you take a black person and you make him a cop, he does more damage often than his white counterparts because he's trying to prove to them that he's one of them. Like this phenomenon where you put somebody from the out group in, they act more like the in group and then they cause more harm. So you can't just like let one or two women in or you end up with people like, Hillary Clinton, like who I don't really love, right? Like you end up with that kind of instead of somebody who is capable of reimagining the whole system. So you would need enough. They say that the threshold is like 3 or 4. If you get 3 or 4 women in, then they actually change the culture. If you get 3 or 4 black people in, then they actually change the culture because they feel supported. Somebody has their back. So yeah, I think it could be. I have enormous hope that it's just a matter of time. If there was not a ticking clock of climate change, I would tell you this, we would get there. I would 100% we will get to the end of these 3 systems and all of the systems that they support. It's just a matter of whether we beat the clock of climate change. That's it. That's the only question left for me. Everything else, we are on the path. We are steadfastly pointed in the right direction. And we are walking there. And every day we pick up more people. And it's not like some people walk with us and they turn around and walk back. Once you're on the side of dismantling patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, you don't ever leave that. So
Right.
we add people, but we don't ever lose people. And we add people and we add people and we add people. And it's a matter of time before we have that magic 3.5%. That's what it needs. Erica Chenoweth, 3.5% of the population, she's a political scientist who found that all social change happens when 3.5% of the population is willing to engage in like protests and activism and direct action. All we need is 3.5% of the population. We are so close if we're not already there.
Right.
It is just a matter of time before we get this future. It's just a question of whether we do it fast enough at this point.
So how can people follow you and support your work?
Right now, just on TikTok. I mean, I'm posting on Instagram as well under the same handle, but with an extra underscore.
but mostly just on TikTok right now. I am writing a book, but it's fiction and it's a long way from being out. So like I'm only like a third of the way through writing it. So it's a long way out to go, but
looking forward to the read. Definitely, you're invited back anytime you want to come through. I'd love to have you back to discuss more. Again, thank you so much for joining, and I bid you a happy afternoon.
yeah, thank you. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right.
Reflection is the mother of the revolution. Revolution is just a sun for the next generation. Generations are just light for the memory for countless babies born each morning. So where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line in time to even picture a timeline where by definition a line has a beginning and ending? No, each morning is just another reason to lose count of a time that never existed. Because while we pretend we walk reality in straight lines, the planet itself spins in cycles, leaving revolution obvious. Dancing circles around a rectangular concept of progress we like to call God, praying salvation white, creating sacred shapes to keep the colors in the corner and the blacks on the fringes and the money on the center. Building a pyramid of interest that keeps its inventors walking through life like it's a shadow of death, when it's really just a shadow of death. Cast by skyscrapers that keep success held high, like a candle in the sky, reflecting the sunshine, providing just enough false light to keep the peasants and hoodlums scrambling to the breadcrumbs, left to keep the righteous backsliding to the semi-line to hell. And I'm wondering why revolution is a four-letter word, yet the way people profanely spell it, like it's filler, like it's offensive, like it's anything else than just another word, rusting on a shelf of good intentions, like love, love life, life free. This is what they taught me and told me was tangible. A few years after I learned that I was black and what black really means, before I took a pencil in my hand for the first time and tried to sketch America, or at least what I thought it could be. I took my own blank sheet of this country, my own little city of being, my own little city of influence, and I thought that if I could just sketch blackness correctly, if I could just make the color walk in sharp lines and complex shades, if I could just express how beautifully black and white could coexist on paper, all the could haves and would haves and should haves would start to amount to shit, and intentions would accumulate into what I did and what I have and what has happened. But what I found was that the world wasn't framed in black and white, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't describe like love, love life, life free, with those means only two-dimensional streams of pain and history that keep repeating themselves in current events. Cause composing a revolution is like trying to draw an ocean that can show which way the water flows. Yeah, the tide is going out, but the waves are still coming in and around and at you, and they're not staying in the shorelines, they're crashing right on top of your neighborhood, and the riptide is dragging children out of their schools, and fathers out of their families, and mothers out of their minds, and you can see them trying to tread water, straining just to stream, with their lungs half filled, drowning from the very same substance every other person in America is drinking and enjoying at this very same moment right now. Freedom. Or at least, if they thought it would be. And so I traded my pencil in for a paintbrush and left revolution for things like truth and meaning and understanding and cooperation, things that could make freedom more safe. And I thought that if I could just color my canvas in such a way that it explained diversity vivid and depicted democracy real, even pictured peace profitable, that the people, all the people they would look, all the people they would listen, and the people they would live, and stop killing each other over colors and shapes and sizes and dimensions, like love, love life, life free, like me, capturing every color that I see in the aerosol can trapped behind my teeth, trying to spray paint dreams faster than wind can take them from me, watching as they vaporize before my very eyes, before they barely leave my lips, before the wall can ever wear my thoughts or receive my gifts, cause America does not exist. It isn't real. This new world has always been here and yet never tangible. Told like those fairy tales my teacher told me a few years before I learned I was black. What black really means. Like love, love life, life free. Like this country with no lines, in the hand of a president that doesn't know how to draw, scribbling a sketchbook so soaked in blood, the pages disintegrating every time pen meets paper. So they bleached it on the fights that was originally woven white anyway, and let borders die until the colors went off the corners, put in concentration camps. And the blacks went off the fringes, placed in penitentiaries. And the money, oh no, let's not forget about the money. It's put back in the center, and everything is right wing, no matter left or the left extreme, or whatever, as long as it flies and blends to a sky so covered in clouds, you can't see the sea. They just walk on faith and pray to a God that lives in a box and can't define his own face or her own sex or its own shape. Like love, love life, life free, free like America, bombing poverty with food, free to choose who eats and who dies, free to define what freedom is, and stable to the eyelids of little kids who never learned that sleeping in intelligence is far worse than walking in ignorance. So they walk freely off a cliff, sleep freely off a cliff, knowing full well where it is. They just don't care. They just don't care because they see what I see.
Much to say between the moments of our games and repartee. There's never much to read between the lines signs of what we need and what we'll take. There's never much to talk about or say aloud, but say it anyway.
They woke up each morning to look in the mirror and see a dream lying behind its teeth, smiling like it wants to say something happy or funny or inspiring, but instead it just stares and grins and stays silent because it's not really there. It's just a lie passed down from parent to parent, like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus, or something to keep little kids moving along through the grades, anxiously waiting the present like it'd be anything more than a toy. That's why I play games with my time and look surprised when it's so broken. When the minutes are bleeding out of its beady eyes, and the months are sticking together like fur, coated with what used to taste like candy, but now just resembles the cavity that torments my waning smile. And I'm old, and I'm gray inside, with black and white so smeared on my soul and psyche, it became my religion, raping the body of my sanity until truth and lie became the last of the relatives of my family. So I traded in my paintbrush for a son, and I thought to myself, if I could just teach this one baby that God has blessed me with to like love, to search for it as if it were a lost brother or sister, to want as if it were the first teddy bear I placed in his crib, if I could just raise this one child to love life, to admire and cherish it, as if it were the finest art, to treat it as like it was priceless, and collect every piece of it, to learn the forgotten craft of creating life. Life would be free. My life. All life would be free through my son, and would be free through my reflection. And that's when I realized